UN Security Council resolution.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Hi, it's Thom Hartmann Book Club, and today we're reading from What Would Jefferson Do? And this is from the chapter Warlords, Theocrats, and Aristocrats Rise Again. The subchapter Theocrats Attack Democracy. And the epigraph that we started the chapter with is from President Abraham Lincoln, where he said, "I am approached with the most opposite opinions and advice, and by men who are equally certain that they represent the divine will. I hope it will not be irreverent of me to say that if it is probable that God would reveal his will on such a point so connected with my duty, it might be supposed he would reveal it directly to me." The subhead of the chapter, America is a Christian nation. No, it's a nation where a lot of Christians live. And I read about Judge Moore and his Ten Commandments thing and his statement that, America was founded in Christianity, and then proceed to share the founders' actual view on this. Our founders were both well-schooled in the history of the Crusades and knew from firsthand experience with Puritanism how oppressive religious men could be, even with small amounts of political power. Ben Franklin fled Boston when he was a teenager, in part to escape the oppressive environment created by politically powerful preachers. And for the rest of his life, he was openly hostile to the idea of a secular power being wielded by those who hold also religious power. Although he was fascinated by the spiritual experience, Franklin had little use for the organized religions of his day. In his autobiographical Toward the Mystery, he wrote, quote, "I have found Christian dogma unintelligible. Early in life, I absented myself from Christian assemblies," end quote. In his autobiography, Franklin talks about how he came to this way of thinking, quote, "My parents had early given me religious impressions and brought me through my childhood piously in the Puritan way. But I was scarce 15 when, after doubting by turns of several points, as I found them disputed in the different books I read, I began to doubt of revelation itself. Some books against deism fell into my hands. They were said to be the substance of sermons preached at Boyle's lectures. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them, for the arguments of the deists, which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to me much stronger than the refutations, and I soon became a thorough deist," end of quote. Franklin, like most of the more well-known founders, was a deist, subscribing to a philosophy made popular by Unitarians who held that the Creator made the universe long ago and has since chosen not to interfere in any way, that, that neither Jesus nor anybody else was divine, or alternatively, that we are all divine, and that there is only one God and not three. Another founding deist who resisted giving political power to those with religious power was George Washington. Jefferson's diary entry for February 1st, 1799 reads, quote, "When the clergy addressed General Washington on his departure from the government, it was observed in their consultation that he had never, on any occasion, said a word to the public which showed a belief in the Christian religion. And they thought that they should so pen their address as to force him at length to declare fidelity, whether he was a Christian or not. They did so. However, Jefferson noted, the old fox was too cunning for them. He answered every article of their address, particularly except that which he passed over without even notice." Jefferson concluded that Washington, quote, "never did say a word on the subject in any of his public papers, and that Governor Morris, a close friend of Washington's, has often told me that General Washington believed no more in that Christian system than he himself did, than Governor Morris did." End of quote from Jefferson. In fact, President George Washington supervised the language of a treaty with African Muslims that explicitly stated that the United States was a secular nation. The treaty with Tripoli, worked out under Washington's guidance and then signed into law the next year by John Adams in 1797, reads, quote, "As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, and as the said states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against any Muslim nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries." End of quote. But for the founders, this wasn't just an issue of being Christian or not. They didn't want any organized religion mixing its functions with government. For example, on February 21st, 1811, President James Madison vetoed a bill passed by Congress that authorized government payments to a church in Washington, D.C. to help the poor. Faith-based initiatives were a clear violation, in Madison's mind, of the First Amendment doctrine of separation of church and state, and could lead to a dangerous transfer of political power to religious leaders. Caring for the poor was a public and civic duty, a function of government, and should not be allowed to become a hole through which churches could reach and seize political power or the taxpayer's purse. Funding a church to provide for the poor would establish, in Madison's words, a legal agency, a legal precedent that would break down the walls of separation the founders had put between church and states to protect Americans from religious zealots gaining political power. Thus, Madison said in his veto message to Congress, he was striking down the proposed law because it helped a church to, quote, "provide for the support of the poor and the education of poor children of the same, which," Madison warned, "would be a precedent for giving to religious societies." That would be giving federal funds. Now, things have certainly changed since then, with the faith-based initiative program that started under Reagan has now exploded. But anyhow, the book is What Would Jefferson Do?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with us, we have Neil McCabe. He is a political reporter with Breitbart News, of all places, Breitbart.com. You can tweet him at Neil W. McCabe, McCabe. And Neil, welcome back to the program.
It's been a long time, too long, Tom. I feel like the prodigal conservative turning.
Yeah. Well, it's
great to be with you, Tommy Hartmann, as we said in Boston.
Indeed, and the coin they gave me. But my first question to you is: are you going to be the only reporter in the White House now?
Well, obviously, Tom, I don't speak on behalf of Breitbart News, but Breitbart.
But are you anticipating this? You know that you're.
Well, I mean, Breitbart already has. Charlie Sperring has been a White House correspondent during the Obama administration for about a year or two, and
after Trump, dissed CNN, he went right to Breitbart.
Well, I mean, we're moving away from fake news, Tom, and going back to
we being Breitbart, or we being
America,
the country,
America, and so we expect Breitbart to be front and center in covering the Trump administration.
Yeah, well,
a relentless march of glory that we're all expecting,
no doubt. Okay, so here's the question.
Go ahead, sir.
The bookies in the UK. And in Ireland and the United Kingdom, they're placing, what are the odds about Donald Trump getting impeached?
Sure.
And it's 4-to-1 odds that he'll be impeached, 5-2 odds he'll serve less than a full term, and 8-1 odds he'll be impeached within 6 months. Now, you've got, on the one hand, the Paul Ryan faction of the Republican Party, which is the vast majority of the Republican Party.
Okay.
A good chunk of it, anyway.
Yep.
The Paul Ryan of the branch of the Republican Party saying that, we need to basically, dial back to where we were before the Obama presidency with regard to health care, right? So, you can get thrown off your policy. You're at the tender mercies of your insurance company, but you at least have an insurance company.
And to throw grandma off the cliff, Tom.
And there are still some federal subsidies. Then you got the cokehead part of the Republican Party, the so-called Freedom Caucus, and they don't want the government involved at all, right? Do away with Medicare, do away with Medicaid, do away with Social Security, kill the whole thing. And then you've got Donald Trump saying the Republicans want to take away your Social Security, your Medicare, and Medicaid. We've got a mashup of him saying this 12 times on the campaign trail. Literally, the Republicans want to take this away. I won't let them do it. And then yesterday, the day before, he said, our Obamacare replacement is going to cover everyone, right? Universal coverage, not universal access, which arguably everybody has if they can only find a rich uncle to beg enough money to buy health insurance from. So, I've been making this argument for a long time that that the reason Donald Trump won the Republican primary is because he ran as a Democrat.
Which is why the Democrats hate him.
And why a lot of Republicans hate him. But, that's how he ate the lunch of Jeb Bush. He ran as, at least with regard to trade, jobs and the social safety net. He ran as a Democrat, and now he's talking about governing as a Democrat. How long before the Republicans kick him out?
Well, there's a lot of stuff we got to clear up that you laid on the table. First of all, Jeb Bush lost because he was a low energy candidate.
Right. And with $170 million?
He raised a lot of money. He ran a very dirty campaign. He dropped a lot of Oppo research on people. And I think the party just didn't react. It worked. Mitt Romney was able to win the nomination, dropping Oppo research on his opponents. And Jeb Bush learned the wrong lessons from Mitt Romney. Going back, but that's Romney won the nomination. Yeah. Sean Spicer and other people are dialing back. I don't know if dialing back is the right word. This promise of universal coverage. If you read the Bob Costa quote from his interview in the Washington Post that came yesterday, it actually says his goal is universal coverage, just as it's your goal and my goal. And we all have this goal
to have world peace and immortality.
And so having a goal is not nearly the concrete legislation.
So Donald Trump is engaging in weasel word.
I don't know if weasel word. I think it's better to have that goal than to have other goals. That's an admirable goal that we laud and appreciate. And but going back to the bookies,
what do you think?
Let's talk about the bookies. Yeah. Quick question: as you know, impeachment isn't the final. Is it impeachment and conviction? Because we learned from William Jefferson Clinton. One can be impeached and not convicted.
Right. The same thing happened to Andrew Johnson after the Civil War. But my sense of it is, and I'm curious your take on this because you're a pretty.
The bottom line,
pretty straightforward guy, and I respect. Tell me about the war in the Republican Party. How much is what are the factions that might actually lead an impeachment charge against Donald Trump in the Republican Party?
I honestly don't see it. I think that we have to remember, first of all, just as a general premise, that if any president has 34 senators, he can basically rule as a king. And that, it's when Barry Goldwater came to Nixon and said, you don't have 34 votes in the Senate anymore, Nixon resigned like a day later because that's game over.
Right.
So Trump has 34 senators. So it almost doesn't matter what the House does.
For how long?
Oh, I think for a while. And you also have to remember that in the Senate, you have
the reason for that is that 34 senators can block an impeachment because the impeachment requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate.
Correct.
Okay,
and so
by the Constitution.
In 2018, there are 23 Democrats up and 8 Republicans up in the Senate, because in 2012, the Democratic senators had a bumper year, had a great year,
right.
Picked up a number of seats. And so you also have Democrats in the Senate playing defense. And so regardless of what happens in the House, you're not going to have a conviction in the Senate.
I don't know. If you've got Democrats playing defense, they'd be more inclined to vote for impeachment, wouldn't they?
They just don't. You just do not want a piece of Donald Trump.
What do you mean?
Because Donald Trump coming into your neighborhood is a big deal, and we haven't really seen that since Reagan.
In other words, what you're saying is members of Congress are afraid that Donald Trump is sufficiently popular that if he campaigns against them, they won't get reelected. They might not even make it through a primary.
You don't even have to have that classic airport rally.
He's got a 34% approval rating right now.
But you're missing the dichotomy between Trump's personal popularity or approval and the approval of his policies. And so
we don't know what his policies are.
Well, I can say as someone who who basically I was part of a team running the polling operation for Breitbart, and so we were not surprised the way the rest of the media was surprised, because we saw what was going on in Michigan and Wisconsin and the different states. But we recognize that Trump is personally unpopular, but his policies are very popular. And this is what people are missing.
If by his policies, you're talking about the policies that he shares with FDR Democrats, with Bernie Sanders.
I'm talking about building a wall with Mexico. That's amazing. The wall with Mexico is amazingly popular. Like enforcing immigration laws. Like you ask Americans, should we enforce immigration laws? That's 90-10.
Yeah, I think there's a bipartisan consensus.
Sure.
I mean, and it was Reagan who stopped enforcing those immigration laws. I mean, he was the one who stopped.
Reagan's always giving those illegals a break.
Well, that's what he did. He stopped putting rich white employers in jail when they hired people who were here without documentation. And the consequence of that was, within a decade, the meatpacking industry was no longer a unionized industry. It was devastated, with undocumented workers. The construction industry, which used to be a really well-paid industry, one of my brothers worked in it for years.
No, but Teddy Kennedy also worked with Reagan on immigration reform. Simpson Mazzoli. So
no, but the law was still on the books. It's still on the books to this day, but no president since Reagan, since '86, has enforced that. Tell me, how many wealthy white employers, how many big corporations have been shut down? How many wealthy white employers have gone to jail since '86 for employing people who are here without documentation? To the best of my knowledge, the answer is zero.
Well, yeah,
it used to happen regularly before '86.
And then certainly in these last 8 years, we stopped putting people in jail. We just give them a big fine.
So my point is that we don't have an illegal immigration problem. We have an illegal employer problem. And I think that both Democrats and Republicans get that and agree on that. Although, ironically, one of those illegal employers, as we found out with the Trump Hotel down here in Washington, D.C., was Donald Trump.
Well, listen, mistakes were made, and we're all learning in this. But you've made my point that there are policies that are associated with Trump, and this is one of the problems that Hillary Clinton had, and I haven't really talked to you in months, is that so many of Hillary Clinton's supporters, say 20 to 25% of Hillary Clinton voters, actually agreed with Trump on the issues. And so that's where she was sliding, because in the booth, that 20 to 25% basically they were voting on issues they agreed with.
Okay, on the issues, again, we're talking
personality-wise, Trump loses.
We're talking, basically the trade.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
he's with the.
This is why I say he ran as a Democrat. Democrats have opposed every single trade deal. I mean, the votes in the House and the Senate on every single trade deal from NAFTA forward were majority Republican, minority Democrat. Democrats opposed them. Yeah. Republicans promoted them, and now Trump is going against Republican orthodoxy, which brings me back to the question of how long before the Republicans say enough of this already, Donald. These are not
the true roots of the Republican Party, because we remember that Lincoln was a protectionist, and so was Alexander Hamilton.
Well, Alexander Hamilton wasn't. Well, arguably he was a Republican. He was a Federalist. Yeah.
Well, the quote Republican Party unquote
was a conservative.
was created in opposition to Hamilton. What became the Democratic Party started as the Republican Party.
Yeah, but that's the modern Democrat. Now we're getting confusing here because it's changed names. You know, Jefferson originally.
I'm just trying to muddy the waters, Tom. Go ahead, please. Take control of your show again.
Well, yeah, we're just about out of time here, Neil. But I'm just, you know, do you think that these bookies? I mean, do you think that there's a chance that there's
no? But I think, you know, and you know, being from New England, there's a lot of people who take Boston money all the time by playing the odds. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of bookies in England and Ireland who have figured out that they can take a lot of money from Northeast liberals and just keep it.
So you think this is a bookie manufactured thing?
There's no.
I mean, there's already, you know. I think it was Maxine Waters. There's already at least one Democrat who's talking about articles of impeachment. Because of his involvement with Russia, or because of his involvement with
if Maxine Waters or any of the Democrats had found one senator to sign a challenge to the Electoral College results, I would say that impeachment was in play. But the Democratic senators are not even going to play.
Yeah.
That's where you're at.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, Neil McCabe, you can tweet him at Neil W. McCabe. What's the W?
William, dear father.
Okay. My middle name is my father's name, too. Neil W. McCabe is his Twitter handle. And Breitbart.com, of course, the website. Neil McCabe, political reporter with Breitbart News. And I'll be picking up your calls in just a minute here about do you think Trump is going to be impeached? And if so, what and why and how? Neil, thanks so much for dropping by.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Good to see you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with more of your calls after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Ralph, I don't have a city for you for some reason, Ralph. I'm not sure where you're calling from, but it says you're watching Free Speech TV. Where are you calling from, Ralph?
Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, okay. What's on your mind?
Okay, your past guest, McCabe. McCabe, Neil?
He's not here any longer.
Yeah, I know. He just went off.
Yeah.
But anyway, my problem with him is that, first of all, he's from Breitbart News, and they are bigots and racists. And
yeah, they used to have a section, and this could have been a conversation, maybe for a future conversation with Neil. Why did Breitbart get rid of the section of black on black crime that they used to have? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and and I do think that Trump need to be impeached. In fact, he should never take the oath of office because he's the worst. He's going to be the worst president we have ever had in this nation. Plus, he's supported by the Russians. You know, until we get the investigation completed and get the facts behind this, we are in trouble.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that there should be a bipartisan commission or a nonpartisan commission that looks into whether or if, to what extent, Russians or anybody else, for that matter, were involved in this election and may have had any influence in the election. I'm absolutely in favor of investigating that. And if you know anything is found, and there probably will be, given what our intelligence communities have said, and then there should be some appropriate response. Whether that appropriate response is impeachment or not, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be up to the Democrats in the House and Senate. But
and his comments about the senators, Democratic senators, and stuff like that, is off the mark too. I think it's off the mark for a simple reason. As long as getting off the subject a little bit, as long as we have problem voting and they can block our votes, we are in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what they did for Trump to win the presidency.
Right.
They blocked that vote.
Well,
Like,
and this
I'm
is
from-
the issue that the Democrats won't talk about, and it makes me crazy. And I don't know why they won't talk about it. I know there are allegations that the Democratic Party did something very similar to what the Republican Party did, knocking people off the voting rolls in California in the primary. And there's speculation that that's why Democrats refuse to talk about it. I'm skeptical of that. I think that's kind of conspiracy theory stuff. But I don't get it. Why the Democrats will not take Greg Palast, for example, and his investigative reporting on interstate cross-checks seriously. I just, there's a half a dozen members of the Congressional Black Caucus who are on this, and nobody's listening to them, and the rest of the Democratic Party won't go there. Makes no sense to me.
And then they should put, when they lock up Trump, they should lock up that guy that did the cross check.
Yeah, Chris Kobach in Kansas. It's we live in interesting times, Ralph. Ralph, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. I appreciate it. We'll be back. It's 25 minutes past the hour.
On April.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
If it can be clearly demonstrated that there was foreign involvement, specifically Russian involvement, in our election, particularly in a way that caused Donald Trump to become president, is that grounds for impeachment? If it can be clearly demonstrated that there is this, to use a phrase I saw in an article in Huffington Post a couple of days ago, a cabal within the FBI, of Republican partisans in the FBI, who held back on the Trump Golden Shower dossier and didn't mention any investigation of Trump, even though they were holding investigations of Trump. At the same time, the director Comey was holding press conferences about how vigorously they were investigating Hillary Clinton. If that can be demonstrated to be the case, is that grounds for impeachment? And if, I mean, I think that's kind of actually a thin one, because Donald Trump probably had nothing to do with that. The question whether he has any involvement with Russia is an open one, and one that I think should be investigated. I think it should be investigated vigorously and thoroughly. What are those grounds? What are they? Where do they come from? Where are they going? What and what's up with that? But the Comey thing, that's not grounds to impeach Donald Trump, because then you still have a Republican in the White House. You have Mike Pence. And probably Paul Ryan as vice president. So now you've got the dynamic duo, right? An even more toxic mix. So what might be the grounds for impeachment? Other than, moral turpitude? I mean, that already got litigated. That was the basis of the entire Clinton campaign. The children are watching. He's an immoral man. Don't vote for him. He's terrible. And, it didn't seem to work, at least in some of the swing states. So, do you think Donald Trump is going to make out his first term?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Make out and Donald Trump in the same sentence was probably the wrong phrase. Do you think Donald Trump will survive his first term, or he will be impeached?
The other path is the study that American psychologist Bruce Alexander did, a study that he did at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, in Vancouver, Canada. Vancouver, BC. This was in the 1970s. And I've talked about this in the past on this program, the study where, you know, this is your brain on drugs, right? Remember the Reagan drug war, Reagan amping up Nixon's drug war? And they had this study where these rats in these cages, if they were given water or water with cocaine or water with heroin, they would choose the drugged water and they would keep taking it and taking it and taking it until they died. And that was like, therefore, we've got to go out and, like, you know, really clamp down on these drug dealers and let's build Homan Square in Chicago or whatever, right? And he looked at this and he says, those rats are in solitary confinement. Of course they're going to medicate themselves. In fact, there's I have a quote from him relative to that. He says, they were severely distressed animals, and severely distressed animals, like severely distressed people, will relieve their distress pharmacologically if they can. So he built a 200-square-foot housing colony, 200 times the square footage of a standard laboratory rat cage. This is from the Psychology Wiki, by the way. Psychology.wikia.com/Ricky/Rat Park Studies. Interestingly, this study has been replicated. Bothman, Murray, and Wise in 1989 published it in Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior. Although the Wikipedia page on the Rat Park says it's never been successfully replicated, and it's nonsense. It's not nonsense, and it has been replicated. And, you know, just like, don't believe everything you read on the internet, I guess. But anyhow, he built this 200-square-foot, 16 to 20 rats of both sexes in residence, an abundance of food, balls, wheels for play, private places for mating and giving birth. Rats who had been forced to consume morphine for 57 days on end. In other words, what you would think of as a seriously addicted drug, were brought to Rat Park and given a choice between plain tap water and water laced with morphine. For the most part, they chose the plain water. Nothing we tried, Alexander wrote, produced anything that looked like addiction in rats that were housed in a reasonably normal environment. So, crime in Chicago, or crime anywhere, is it a symptom of people? I mean, you know, we're mammals, rats are mammals. We have very similar nervous systems, and you know, we share a limbic brain. If people feel that the quality of their life is not that different from how the rats feel when they're in a lab cage, they're gonna act out in ways that are dysfunctional, just like the rats did. We also know from rat crowding experiments that were done back in the 60s and 70s that if you crowd rats, they'll turn on each other, they'll kill each other. So is the solution to the problem of crime in the United States, and you know, I'm using Chicago as an example just because Donald Trump keeps, and every Republican at every turn, in every opportunity, will point to it and mention it. And you know, as I've said many times, I think, you know, part of the problem with gun violence in Chicago is the fact that Mike Pence's Indiana has super lax gun laws, and people can just, you know, drive over the border and pick up, you know, most of the guns that are found in Chicago came from Indiana. But is the solution to do what Donald Trump is suggesting, which is what President Duarte is doing in the Philippines right now, which is basically declare all-out war on people who are behaving badly? And Duarte is killing them. I haven't heard Trump call for that, but it's happening anyway. Or is the solution to go in and say, okay, here's a neighborhood in distress. We're going to undistress this neighborhood. We're going to put in some really high-quality schools. We're going to bring jobs into this neighborhood. It's time for a Works Progress Administration, a WPA. The government is going to be the employer of last resort. If no company, see, this is assuming that we don't change our trade laws so that the jobs come back to America. So let's make the government the employer of last resort. There's lots of things that need to be done. There's things that could be manufactured. There's things that, yeah, I mean, there's just lots of things that could be done. We could create government jobs, government paid for jobs, As Franklin Roosevelt said, the best welfare program is a job. People, gives people meaning in their lives. Go into these neighborhoods and say, okay, here are the here's jobs, here's housing, here's food, here's good education. Let's standardize all this stuff. Let's improve all this stuff. Let's create a reasonable, instead of we're just going to drop people in the middle of the poverty level, let's bring people up to at least the bottom of what you would call the middle class, and then let them launch themselves from there, because they will. We've seen this over and over and over again in the history of the United States, and the best example was the WPA and the CCC. So, my rip.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I think we need to seriously change the way that we're looking at crime in this country. This is amazing stuff. Kathy McMorris Rogers, the Republican from Washington State, a member of the House of Representatives, I think she represents Spokane. And in fact, I'm quite sure of it because she gave a speech there. And radio station KXLY reports, this is from a piece in The Hill by Max Greenwood. A Republican congresswoman was booed on Monday during a Martin Luther King Jr. Day speech where she discussed Republican plans for repealing Obamacare. The crowd called her a liar and chanted about saving health care during a speech in Spokane, Washington. She is the chairwoman of the House Republican Conference and has been a strong proponent of repealing President Obama's health care law. That repeal, by the way, will kick between 20 and 30 million people off their health insurance. It's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. Rick in San Jose, California. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Responding to, I think it's likely that Donald Trump will be impeached or resign gracefully or disgracefully. My feeling is that he never wanted this job anyway. He was glad to win the election, but he doesn't want to do the work. He's already going to leave the work up to all kinds of the freak show that I call a cabinet.
Yeah. Let's call it a basket of deplorables. It's a perfect description.
Yes, nominated and approved.
Yes, indeed.
But I want to ask if he is actually impeached and convicted.
Right.
Are we going to get what we want?
No, we're going to get. We may get something. We may get something worse in some regards, in as much as Donald Trump, at least, as I keep saying, campaigned as a Democrat. But Donald Trump has a history of being a pragmatist rather than an ideologue, whereas Mike Pence is a right-wing ideologue.
That's exactly right. He's what we'd get is a Neanderthal nut job heading this Congress. With some, the Republicans hate Donald Trump as much as the Democrats. I mean, they'll be glad to have any kind of reason to put out there to go ahead and remove him from office. And I don't think Trump is even going to be that, he'll squawk and tweet, but we can't have Mike Pence in the office of the presidency. We can't.
Right. Well, that boat has sailed, Rick. I mean, all these various efforts that took place over the last 6 or 8 weeks, about let's change the Electoral College. I mean, let's convince the Electoral College to say no. There have been all these kind of Hail Marys that have been floated, and none of them have worked. I mean, we're stuck with a Republican in the White House, and so I guess an interesting question would be, who is the most dangerous Republican? Who is a more dangerous Republican in the White House, Donald Trump or Mike Pence? And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I mean, I could build a strong case for either one. My fear about Donald Trump is his thin skin, his hair trigger temper, his inability to be reflective. When you're in charge of a nuclear arsenal, or you can say things that could cause other countries to go to nuclear war with each other, like, for example, India and Pakistan, or China and Taiwan. When you're in that kind of a position, That's, that represents a really serious danger. On the other hand, Donald Trump is saying that he wants to make sure that everybody in America has health care. He wants to be popular. And Democratic policies are popular, which is why he ran on them in the Republican primary and continued to run on some of them in the general election. And Mike Pence doesn't give a rat's ass about what the American people think. I mean, his popularity ratings were in the 30s in Indiana. He couldn't have gotten elected dog catcher, which is why in my opinion, why he glommed on to the opportunity to be vice president. And he would team up with Paul Ryan and not just roll back the New Deal. Not just roll back the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson, do away with Medicare and Medicaid and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and all that stuff. He would repeal the New Deal. He would repeal Franklin Roosevelt which Donald Trump is not talking about doing. So it's like, which is worse? It's poisoning by arsenic or poisoning by strychnine. I don't know.
We want to try to keep Donald Trump in office for 2 years while we go ahead and remarshal our forces to try to retake some part of Congress.
Well, here's the big danger of Donald Trump being in office for 2 years, Rick. Donald Trump, and this is something Mike Pence doesn't know, and this is the political danger of Donald Trump, is that he knows how to use the media. This was, if you want to talk about the failings of the Obama administration, the biggest failing was the failure to use the bully pulpit of the White House to manipulate the media, basically, to tell America what he had done for us. When FDR did Social Security, every American knew that FDR did it. When Lyndon Johnson did the Civil Rights Act, for better or for worse, particularly in the South, every American knew Lyndon Johnson was responsible for that. Obviously, Americans know President Obama was responsible for Obamacare, but there's a whole lot of other really, really good things that he did that he just doesn't brag about. I mean, President Obama is a self-effacing, modest man. Donald Trump is absolutely not. And in fact, Donald Trump will take credit for things like, for example, this Chrysler Fiat, saying that they're going to keep a factory, they're going to invest a bunch of money, $18 million, I think it was, and build or expand a factory in Michigan. That was negotiated a year and a half ago with the United Auto Workers. But Donald Trump took credit for it last week in a tweet, right? And the media, only a couple of media outlets even pointed out the fact that this thing was decided a year and a half ago in a union negotiation. Pretty much everybody else is just repeating Trump. So if Trump stays in office for a couple of years, he's going to take credit for everything that gets done. He's going to do it aggressively. He's going to do it vigorously in ways that you could argue President Obama should have, or at least the Democrats. Let's say the Democrats more generally, not just Obama himself. And I don't mean this as a criticism of Obama. This is just, the different styles, right? The different governing styles. But Trump with his bombast, he could actually rally America to his side if he continues to promote some of these Democratic-leaning policies that, the Republicans might grit their teeth and go along with. So anyhow, Rick, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's always good to hear from you. Idris in Omaha, Nebraska. Am I saying your name right? Idris.
Yeah, it's Idris.
Idris.
Yeah,
Idris, what's up?
Thank you, Tom.
It sounds like you're on a speakerphone. It sounds like you're in the bottom of a tin can.
Let me get off.
Unless you're sitting in the John, in which case, not much we can do about that.
All right, is that better?
That's much better. So what's up?
Okay, sorry, Tom. Hey, Tom, I'm a millennial that owns a small IT firm here in Omaha, Nebraska. We specialize in analytics, software, that sort of thing. And I wanted to touch up on a subject that you brought up last week about manufacturing back in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And you did bring up the fact that we could transition to manufacturing jobs here if we dedicated our time and so, if there was a spearheaded effort.
Right.
But I wanted to follow up on that is I'm concerned that that's just a stopgap measure for AI and automation to take over eventually. I'm concerned that progressives aren't pushing the agenda that a universal basic income is inevitable at the exponential rate in growth of technology and AI. Well, and I want to know your thoughts.
I don't entirely disagree with you, and I think that we're inevitably going to be having that conversation in a more serious way, probably a decade or two down the road. But AI and automation requires somebody to manufacture the automation, to program the AI, to manufacture the computers. I lived in China for a month in November of 1986. I lived in Beijing. I was studying acupuncture at the acupuncture hospital there. Louise and I visited Shenzhen, which is right off Hong Kong. They had just turned this into a new manufacturing district in maybe 1985, it must have been, or thereabouts. And it was dirt roads. It was a little tiny town, maybe 50,000 people, something like that. It was nothing. Beijing, there were no skyscrapers. There was this, town out of the 19th century. And you look at China now, it is modern, it is vibrant, and it's because of manufacturing. So and much of that manufacturing is manufacturing that used to be done in the United States. So I disagree that AI and robotics have rendered manufacturing irrelevant. I do agree that over time they're going to reduce the need for labor. That's one option. The other option is what Time magazine was pointing out in 1967 in the article I quote pretty extensively in my book, Crash of 2016. We need to retitle a book now, which was that if productivity continued, they were saying, this was Time magazine in 1967, if productivity continues to increase to the year 2000 at the same rate, and wages continue to follow that productivity as they had for the previous 200 years, then by the year 2000, the average American will be making about $120,000 a year in what would be today's income. Sam and I translated the numbers. Or will be still making the $40,000, $50,000 a year that they were making before, but will be working a 20-hour work week. And, those are alternatives to a universal basic income as well. And the reality is that because of Reaganomics, including Reagan's trade policies, the so-called free trade policies, which were really mostly George Herbert Walker Bush's policies, but and were instituted, he negotiated NAFTA and all that kind of stuff. But that has brought us to where we are, and the result of that is that $17 trillion has been taken out of the hands of the middle class in the last 35, 40 years and given to the top 1%, which is why you now have 8 men, 6 of them Americans, who own as much wealth as half the planet, and that was definitely not the case in 1980 when Reagan came into office. So redistributing that wealth by changing tax policy, changing trade policy, I think is a real possibility. Idris, great to hear from you. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Tom in Seattle. Hey, Tom, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for having me on. Oh, I was just thinking about you when you were talking with this Breitbart guy. I was thinking, wow, you guys are both making the perfect case for starting 2 other parties. The Tea Party could actually be a party or something like that. And what if the Bernie branch and the Black Caucus stepped out of the Democratic Party? I mean, we have a representative, Pramila Jayapal, here in Seattle that is not even going to attend the inauguration, and yet most Democrats are going to attend. And I really don't understand that. I think it's because conservatives have taken over the Democratic Party to a certain point, controlling it at least. And
Tom, it's not. That's not why. The Democrats who are attending the inaugural are doing it. And by the way, in 2009 and in 2013, when President Obama was inaugurated and re-inaugurated, there were a lot of Republicans who didn't show up. They didn't, make a loud noise about it. They didn't do it as some kind of giant protest. Most Americans don't even know that. They just didn't bother to show up. There were a bunch of empty seats on the Republican side. I mean, I was there for the one in 2009. Anyhow, back to your point. I'm sorry. Forgive for the interruption.
But I was just thinking. I've looked into the past about different things, turning points for the political landscape. Consider that Joe Biden was running the Judicial Committee when Clarence Thomas was up for nomination to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Well, there was 2 other women that were also going to testify against Clarence Thomas, and Joe Biden shut down the hearings.
Yeah, I know.
And
And Joe Biden also was the principal author of the bankruptcy bill that made it impossible for millennials to discharge their student debt through bankruptcy because he was funded by the big banks out of Delaware. He's definitely a corporate Dem. It doesn't mean he's evil or terrible, but we have to acknowledge that reality within the Democratic Party. It's the Cory Booker thing, voting on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry rather than on behalf of the American people.
Yeah, well, and they've taken over the Democratic Party. And
they took over the Democratic Party in '92.
Bernie tried to swing it back, and what did they do? They did everything to sabotage him. So, it's time to step out of it, I think.
Well, that battle is going on right now, and you're going to see. The third way, and I don't. Not sure who's running it these days. Harold Ford Jr. used to be running that thing, but I think he's not any longer. But the third way is putting $20 million into basically trying to support the corporate Dems and keep the Democratic Party corporate. And David Brock, down in Florida, raising money from millionaires and billionaires. I mean, there's some significant forces within the Democratic Party that are trying to keep it the corporate friendly party so that they can have money to win elections, and they're convinced. Many of them probably good faith convinced that if they blow off these billionaires and corporations, that they'll never win an election again because they won't be able to buy TV ads. And that was sort of the argument I was making about don't go so hard on Cory, but I've been rethinking that. I think I was wrong, frankly. I think Bernie was right. Those 13 Democrats betrayed the Democratic Party as well as the United States, and we shouldn't put up with it. Whether it's going to create new parties, though, Tom, a party is $1 billion machine. Much better to get inside the Democratic Party and take it over. Tom, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Great to hear from you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Jared in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I want to talk about Trump. I don't believe he's going to be impeached. He should be. In fact, I would go one step further to push for an international war tribunal the second he gets into office, the second a drone strike kills an innocent person. I believe he should be prosecuted. And
wouldn't that echo down to President Obama and President Bush?
Oh, yeah. I agree, too. I think they all should. Even Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton should all be prosecuted and, receive the same treatment that the Nazis, the Japanese, and Saddam Hussein received. I mean, we have to be very honest with ourselves. We're being run by literal mass murderers here.
Yeah.
Jared,
I don't disagree that some of our foreign policy is hurting us more than it's helping us, and that and in some ways, the follow-up on George W. Bush's giant war crimes, which arguably were started by his father with the first invasion of Iraq. I mean, that's where it really all began, and which was done for political purposes. He figured that would get him reelected, and it was a bet that he lost in '92. But I don't disagree we've made mistakes, but saying that we should prosecute our last 5 presidents as war criminals, that's over the top. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's not going to lead to any kind of reasonable dialogue. We should be talking, though, seriously, and Jared, thank you for the call. We need to be seriously talking about these policies and whether they are hurting us more than helping us. We also need to be talking about, our allies and, who are messing in our elections. For example, Netanyahu coming over and speaking before Congress at the invitation of the Republicans in order to take on Obama. It's like, you got that. You've got, did Putin and did Russia mess with the election? You've got, what are the Saudis up to and who are they funneling their money to? You've got a Holocaust going on in Yemen right now that the American media refuses to report on. Hundreds of thousands of children looking like stick figures and dying of starvation because Saudi Arabia is bombing the crap out of Yemen and with our weapons and our money and our tacit support, and nobody's even talking about it. And this is a Shia-Sunni war as much as anything else. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. There's just a lot of stuff here. But, you know, the basis for impeachment is a war criminal. I mean, you know, before he's even president, no, not a chance. Mark, I said corruption, yes. Mark in New York City. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Okay, so I got first a question if you think Bernie is going to come back to the brunch.
I don't know. I doubt it, frankly, because he's now, I mean, back when he was doing brunch with Bernie, he was on a couple of committees and he was just your average senator. And now he's part of the Democratic leadership. He's the number 2 guy on a couple of very, very big committees. His workload has probably doubled. So whether he will, even be able to, I don't know. I have had conversations with him and with his people. I know he told me personally, he said, I wish I could, I would love to do it. He didn't say he couldn't. You know, we'll see. We'll see.
Maybe from time to time, you could just call him up or whatever. Who knows?
I'm sure from time to time he'll drop by. And in the meantime, there's a bunch of other really great people. Mark Pocan has been very enthusiastic about coming on the program.
Yes.
I'd like to get Keith Ellison to come on and do this. We need to offer to extend the invitation to a few people, which we haven't done up to this point because we were waiting to see what might happen with Bernie. Anyhow, back to you, Mark.
Now, okay, so now I got one other question, then a short comment on California splitting up into 3 states, because that would actually increase the senators by 6 or by 4.
Well, it would increase it by 4. It would take it to 6 for California.
Right. But it would also increase the House of Representatives. And it could be the way out in terms of swimming against this tide of Republican hegemony.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I was in California this weekend. I flew out to L.A. Saturday morning. I flew back yesterday morning. Wow, it's like it is like another country. I mean, we had an all-day meeting on Sunday. We're working on another global warming project right now. We had this all-day meeting. And 3 of the people who showed up were driving electric vehicles. And one was a Fiat, one was a Mercedes, and one was a Tesla. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And Fiat, an electric Fiat? I'd never even heard of such a thing. And we went to lunch in Santa Monica, and we all drove down to Santa Monica in these electric vehicles. And there are these electric charging stations at the parking spots. And in Santa Monica, you can park for free and charge your car for free. And so there's all these electric cars everywhere I look. It's like it's amazing. It's like anyway. So I doubt that California is going to be breaking into three states anytime soon. The idea of secession from the Union is probably has a little more legs there.
If they had that argument here with Staten Island, always wanted to secede from New York City.
Yeah. Well, see, if California does that, Florida should split into 2, Texas should split into 2, and New York State should split into 2, and then you would have a more proportionally representative Senate. It wouldn't change the House much because the House is based on population, and by splitting up a state into 2, you're not changing population, the gross numbers. But it would change the Senate. You would add senators every time you did that. And
which would seem almost easier to achieve than a constitutional amendment to repeal Citizens United States.
It may be, but it would have to be done at the state level. And I'm not hearing from any of those states any movements, for New York to separate it. To separate itself from New York City, to separate itself from New York State, for Southern Florida to separate itself from the rest of Florida, for Texas to split. For California to split in 3. I mean, those are the things that I think should happen, but I think it's very much a pipe dream. Mark, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back in the next hour with more. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Democratic Party right now, and what we can think, how we can think about this, and what we can do about it too. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is toward the very end, and it's a chapter titled Transforming Culture Through Politics. Many think it's just to fund tax cuts and subsidies for the rich, that the multimillionaire CEOs who've taken over almost all senior posts in government are just pigs at the trough. And this is a spectacular but ordinary form of self-serving corruption. It all seems so plausible, and there's even a grain of truth to it. But juicy deals for right-wing government insiders and their friends are just a byproduct of the real and deeper war against democracy. The neoconservatives are perfectly happy for us to think that they're just opportunists skirting the edges of legality and morality. But this is far more dangerous than simple government corruption. Indeed, the neoconservatives claim to be anti-government. As a leading spokesman for the neocon agenda, Grover Norquist told National Public Radio's Mara Liasson in a May 25, 2001 Morning Edition interview, quote, "I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub," end quote. Without a larger view, the issues of domestic spending, oil, neoconservative power plays in both major parties, the loss of liberties, anti-government rhetoric, and war in the Middle East all seem like separate and unconnected events. They're not. The new conservatives who've seized the Republican Party and who, through the Democratic Leadership Council, are nipping at the heels of the Democratic Party are not our parents' conservatives. Historic conservatives like Barry Goldwater, Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower would be appalled, although their philosophical roots go back to Alexander Hamilton, who openly argued during the Constitutional Convention that royalty was the best form of government. The neocons have always been kept to the fringe. Indeed, the Reagan-Bush revolution flew in the face of traditional conservative ideals. As John Stockwell notes in his book, The Praetorian Guard, the U.S. Role in the New World Order, Reagan-Bush were proud of their contempt for their concerns of environmentalists, with Reagan once saying, "If you've seen one redwood, you've seen them all." Their Department of the Interior under James Watt sold off minerals and forests to campaign contributors at fire sale prices, and their EPA, in many cases, moved from prosecuting corporate polluters to legitimizing and protecting them under the guise of regulation. Although James Madison wrote in 1792 that an important role of government was to promote a strong middle class, quote, "by the silent operation of the laws, which, without violating the rights of property, reduce extreme wealth toward a state of mediocrity and raise extreme indigence toward a state of comfort," end of quote from James Madison. That was not a sentiment shared by those in the Reagan-Bush revolution. Instead, Reagan raised taxes on the middle class and working people while cutting taxes by more than 60% for the most wealthy in America. At the same time, he bragged that he'd eliminated more than 1,000 programs for poor people and even proposed that poor school children should be content with ketchup as their daily vegetable. At the same time, the Reagan-Bush administration and later the George W. Bush administration worked hard to roll back the very individual liberties that America's founders had fought and died for. Dwight Eisenhower left office warning Americans about the dangers of the concentration of power resulting from corporations getting into bed with the military. But the Reagan-Bush and W. Bush administrations openly embraced these corporate powers, inviting them into the halls of governance and hungrily sucking at the teat of their campaign contributions. In the past, those promoting what is now called the New Conservative Agenda went by different names. The founders of America knew that for 6,000 years, civilized human beings had been ruled by one of three groups: kings, theocrats, or feudal lords. Kings held power by virtue of the threat of violence and continual warfare. Theocrats and popes held power by the people's fear of a god or gods, and feudal lords by wealth and the power that comes from throwing average people into poverty. The new idea of our founders in 1776 was to throw off all three of these historic tyrannies and replace them with a fourth way, the people being ruled by themselves, a government that derived its legitimacy and continuing existence solely from the approval of its citizens. Government of, by, and for we the people. They called it a constitutional Republican democracy. What we are seeing now in the conservative agenda is nothing less than an attempt to overthrow Republican democracy and replace it with a worldwide feudal state. The last time this happened, the feudalists took over a monarchy in North America. In December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I chartered the East India Company, ultimately leading to a corporate takeover of the Americas for the colonists that ended with the Boston Tea Party and 3 years later, the American Revolution. The corporate state partnership of the East India Company and the UK went on to conquer India, but eventually disintegrated as the British Empire faded and the British government, along with most of Western Europe, embraced somewhat more Jeffersonian forms of democracy. Conservatism raised its head again in the 20th century, revived by Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini. The Italian dictator even used the word corporatism to describe it and then later renamed it as fascism, a word defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as, quote, a system of government that exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership together with belligerent nationalism. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hang on just a second here. I'm trying to get the right emoticon to send to Sue. There we go. Anyway, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with, where did my one sheet go? Everything seems to be, oh, here it is, right here. Steve Beeman is on the line with us. He's the chairman of the Society to Advance Financial Education, SAFE. He's host of the Steve Beeman Show on AM 560 in Chicago, The Answer, Sundays 8 to 9 p.m. Steve Beeman, BEAMAN.com is the website. You can tweet him at Steve, S-T-E-V-E Beeman, B-E-A-M-A-N. Steve, welcome back to the program.
Well, hi, Tom. It's great to be on with you as always.
It has been a while. The New York Times is reporting that if Obamacare, well, actually, they're reporting that the Congressional Budget Office, which is not a partisan organization, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said on Tuesday that repealing major provisions of the Affordable Care Act would cost 18 million people their insurance in the first year and could cost increase the number of uninsured Americans by 32 million in 10 years, while causing insurance premiums to double over that time. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Warren is, speaking out about. We have a clip of Elizabeth Warren speaking out about this, don't we, Chris? I think so. Here it is. This is her.
Nope. The very first thing on the Republican agenda in the 115th Congress is to shatter health care in America. The first thing, rip health insurance out of the hands of millions of Americans who need it. The first thing, massively raise the costs of health insurance for everyone who has it. The first thing, create chaos for hospitals, clinics, and insurance companies and send their costs spiraling out of control. The first thing, abandon the people they were elected to represent. The first thing, repeal and run away.
So repeal and run away, is this what your party's up to?
Well, I first of all, Elizabeth Warren doesn't have a lot of credibility in this statement. But here's the thing, Tom. We all have the same goal and objective, right? We want to provide the best high-quality medical care to as many people as we possibly can. The question isn't that we want to achieve it. It's how to get there. On one hand, you have a state-run system that says the government can do the best job at it. On the other hand, you have the private sector solution. Most of us in the right believe the private sector is a more efficient provider of healthcare services than is the government.
How can you believe that in the face of all evidence to the contrary? You've got, Stephen J. Hemsley, the CEO of United Healthcare himself, has skimmed more than $1 billion out of his company. Every penny of that came from saying, no, you can't have that liver transplant. No, we will not pay for your child's vaccination. No, you're going to have to pay an extra $30 copay. I mean, the for-profit model for healthcare is nuts. We don't do that with fire departments. We don't say, we're going to have for-profit fire departments. Why are our bodies less valuable than our houses, Steve?
Tom, they're great talking points, and they certainly serve to whip up the masses. They absolutely are. You're equating $1 billion payout to a shareholder as something that destroys healthcare. It
wasn't a payout to a shareholder. He's a CEO.
Well, he's a shareholder, too. That's how he gets his money. It's in stock options.
Most of it. Yeah, okay, you're right.
But the fact is, Tom, we share the same objective, but those of us on my side believe competition creates better, cheaper product that's higher value and higher quality. And in every market, that's proven true. The problem in healthcare is we don't have competition. It's absolutely true.
Okay, competition 101, Steve. And I'm assuming you have some economic background. In order to have competition, in order to have real competition, you have to have a transparent marketplace. You have to have equal power, relatively speaking, and equal information
out of it. That's
on
right.
both
You have
sides
to have
of the marketplace. And the fact of the matter is that the average American, I had back surgery a couple of weeks ago. I did a lot of research on that, but I still am never going to have the level of knowledge that the surgeons in this town have to figure out, what should be done and who's going to be more expensive or less expensive or whatever. I mean, medicine is inherently impossible to have competitive unless you're talking about little tiny slices of it like vaccines.
The fundamental issue here is you believe that healthcare is a right. I believe healthcare is a privilege. That is the philosophical break point. And that really is what it comes down to. If it is a right, then you stand correct. It should be provided to all people on a, pari passu basis. If I'm correct, then it should be provided based on your ability to afford it. I go down that path because I think a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think everybody's better off.
What about the people who don't have boats?
Well, I think we need to work on that. And if you look over the last, 200 years of the economy, our poor people in the United States are better off than wealthy people in most countries around the world.
I'm not talking just about poor people. I'm talking about working Americans. They're being having 20% of our health care budget being skimmed off the top by banksters. We are the only developed country in the world that allows banksters to skim 20% off the top of our health care budget.
All day on this. Those banksters are the shareholders in 401k programs and IRA programs and KEO programs that are using that healthcare stock for retirement.
And over 90% of that is held by the top 5% of Americans.
Well, first of all, that's not true. We've talked about that on this program. The fact is the majority of the stocks in this country are held by average people with 401k.
That is not true.
So, well, I've shown you the data from the New York Times before. We went through that a few months ago. We could talk about that another day. But the reality is we've got to put competition into healthcare.
No, you just said we have to put profit into healthcare.
And competition.
How do you have competition?
We do it by eliminating the state lines guidelines where companies can't sell across state lines. I think we put in
Wait a second. Okay, Steve, the reason why first of all, I thought Republicans were in favor of states' rights. The reason why you can't sell across state lines is because you have state insurance commissioners who are responsive to the people. It's called local control. People elect their local state government, and that governor appoints the state insurance commissioner who looks out for the people in the state.
And so once again, we have government causing the problem of not allowing multiple insurance companies to sell across state lines.
You can't have competition without rules.
Well, the rules need to be equally applied without government favoring.
That's my point.
That's
my point, Steve. How could you have a football game if one team is allowed to have 20 players, the other team's only allowed to have 4 players because one team has more money than the other?
equal companies, equal rules. I'm all for it. But government that you support has spent 8 years picking Goldman Sachs and Bank of America over the small guy. They've picked Blue Cross and Blue Shield as the favored winner in most states. In Illinois, they're the only provider left. So what government has done is squash competition, put favorites in place, creating this quasi-fascist system. And then we all end up with less product, less quality, and higher cost.
So you don't think that people at the state level, so you're repudiating the Republican talking point that states should have the right to regulate things. I mean, we did this with credit cards. You're probably not old enough to remember, but there used to be every state's, it wasn't the insurance commissioner, but there used to be a bank, basically a banking commissioner who regulated credit cards and banks in the states. I mean, there's vestiges of this in every state that regulate the banks, but they're vestigial, really. We did away with that during the Nixon administration. And North Dakota, or maybe it was South Dakota, it's one of the Dakotas, I mix them up all the time, dropped their consumer protections on people on credit cards to the point where all the credit card companies moved to that state. And that's why whatever credit card you got in your wallet, it will say, North Dakota.
That's right.
And so you're suggesting we should do the same thing with health insurance so that the most sucky, awful, god-awful, we're going to rip you off, we're going to steal you blind companies will all locate themselves in the state that has the lowest common denominator.
And I trust companies far more than I trust government. Companies have a governor. It's called going out of business. Government never goes out of business. It just gets bigger.
No, government gets rebooted. It's called elections. Government is answerable to the people.
When was the last time government got smaller? It doesn't get smaller.
Steve, I get it that you hate America and that you hate the American system. I understand that. I get it that you think that corporations are better than government. I understand that.
I trust them. They have a governor on them.
But Mussolini, when he invented the word fascism, made it very clear this is government by corporations. And I realize that that's what you're promoting, but I don't think it works with healthcare.
Government and business in bed together, it's an unholy alliance. I want to get government out of the business linkages. I don't like Goldman Sachs running the government. I want to cut those ties. I want to get government out of it.
Okay, do you want to get the NFL out of football?
Well, I don't see the relationship there, Tom. I think you're stretching.
Football is a game. It has rules. The economy is a game. It has rules. If you don't have a basic set of rules, the marketplaces don't magically appear, Steve. The marketplace is created by government. We create a stable currency. We create the rules of the road. We have courts to regulate it. And you're saying, no, get rid of that. Let corporations run the show. That's fascism that you're promoting.
The marketplace is created by people. There are governors put on it by equally applied rules, equal treatment under the law.
The rules come from where?
They come from the people's government.
They come from government, exactly.
I disagree with that.
But you're just saying government should get out of the way. There should be no rules.
Government should lessen its impact where it restricts competition.
So the corporations could just rip us off however they want.
No, let me give you a better solution. How about people become responsible for their own health care and we give them a tax deduction so that instead of having to get it through their company, they can buy it privately on the individual marketplace and put 300 million buyers behind a free system.
Oh yeah, there's lots and lots of Americans who are paying more than $10,000 or $12,000 a year in federal income taxes who would take that tax deduction and buy. Mitt Romney was right. 47% of Americans don't pay federal income taxes because they make so little, because the corporations that you so love are using a welfare model of paying people just below the level, just low enough. I mean, this is the whole thing with Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, paid just low enough that your workers, are eligible for Medicare or for Medicaid, excuse me, and for
anyway, when a company provides health care, the people are still paying for it. Companies don't pay taxes. People do. And so people are taxed already.
Steve, I got the bumper sticker, but and it's BS, and that's a whole nother argument. But to keep this back to health care, so I think you honestly said it, and I think it really is the crux of the whole thing. You think that health care should be a privilege that's available to those people who can afford to pay for it, and I think that health care should be a right. I think that when Jefferson wrote "Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness," I think life means life. And I am pro-life, and I think that every American should have the opportunity, if their body is metaphorically on fire like their house, they should have the equivalent of a fire department to put it out.
The question is, Tom, if it's a right, to what level? Does everybody have a right to everything that's available in medicine?
I would say so.
Okay, well, that's a very expensive system. Somebody's got to pay for it.
It is working in every developed country in the world except the United States.
I would still argue we have the best healthcare. People I know from around the world come here for advanced medical treatment. They don't go to Canada.
The statistics are very clear, Steve. More Americans leave the United States for healthcare than people from other countries come to the United States for healthcare.
We see different statistics. I'll accept that. But the fact of the matter is I believe in a free market solution. I think it's a right or a privilege, not a right. I think that you need to work hard and be self-sustaining in a free economy, in a free country to sustain freedom. I think collectivism doesn't work.
And if you're not born a member of the Lucky Sperm Club, if you're born in Appalachia into utter poverty.
Tom, I was bankrupt at 23 with no college degree, and I was able to pull myself up. Now, the fact is it can be done, but when you teach people to be victims and you're teaching people they can't do it, they'll believe you. I am doing
none of the above. And again, another red herring, Steve. You take us off down another rabbit hole. If you're saying that health care should be a privilege, that means that you're going to have a lot of people who don't have health care. What happens when the United States is hit with an epidemic of tuberculosis?
Okay, and so you say to me, Steve, are you willing to negotiate and say everybody gets a base level of care a la Medicare? And I say, yeah, I'd be willing to discuss that. I don't have a problem with that. And I think that's where this Trump plan is going to go, where we have a Medicare program put on as a base level of coverage for people. But then you as a free person can choose to buy a supplemental insurance if you can afford more.
So you're suggesting that as a public, because my argument is basically a public health argument, that we don't want everybody, we don't want people walking around contagiously with deadly diseases. Therefore, everybody should have access to health care. You're saying cut it off at that.
I'm saying everybody should have.
But if you get cancer, screw you, right?
Well, if you get cancer, you should have your own health insurance.
Yeah, okay, I got it. Steve Beeman, chairman of the Society to Advance Financial Education, SAFE. This is Steve Beeman, BEAMAN.com is the website. You can tweet him at Steve Beeman. Steve, thanks for dropping by today.
Thank you, Tom.
I think we did a good job of illustrating the divide in the debate. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
Yeah, glad to get through. I believe that the detractors here are making a mistake. I think we need to
the detractors of what?
Open arms.
The Trump detractors?
How's that?
You said the detractors, and I don't know what you're talking about. You mean the people who...
the people that are really opposed to this whole idea of Trump becoming president.
Right, okay.
I think we need to change that approach and welcome him with open arms. His sensitivity to criticism and praise makes him very pliable. This guy can be easily manipulated.
So all the Democrats should get out there. All the Democrats should get out there with signs that say, Donald, we love the fact that you promised that you would not take away Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. We love the fact that you promised that everybody in America is going to have full access to health care. We are with you.
I am with you.
Yeah, and we love the fact that you want to bring the jobs back home, bring the jobs. You know, there might be something to your argument, Jerry. I don't think the Democratic Party would ever do it. But
well, I don't either, but he becomes so negative when he's criticized. And I think that puts him in a situation where, and the more what you say, the more you say, the farther right he goes.
Yeah.
I think you said it perfectly. We need to welcome him based on his campaign rhetoric, and it's a heck of a lot better than Pence and Ryan.
Yeah. At least parts of it. Yeah, major parts of it, actually. I don't disagree. Jerry, that's a very interesting thought. Thank you very much for the call. Jane in Erlanger, Kentucky, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Jane, what's on your mind?
Hey, thank you, number one, for your ideals and all of your positions on our environment. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for fighting for that.
Thanks for the acknowledgement.
No problem. Well deserved. I feel like we have transcended into a parallel universe with this man who has been elected to our presidency, who on every single occasion when you check the facts, and I'm not going to go into all the facts, you know what they are, as far as his bragging about sexual misconduct, to telling the Russians publicly on TV to hack into Hillary Clinton's emails. And I just can't believe that I'm seeing this happen right before my eyes and other people's eyes. And so many people are, not looking for the man behind the curtain. They are just listening to the rhetoric. And the fact that he has criticized John Lewis, who has shaped history more than what Donald Trump will ever understand.
Yeah, I think that was a huge strategic mistake on Trump's part, and it belies his ignorance of the political landscape. He probably had no idea who John Lewis was.
He can't. And that is my point exactly. When, in your opinion, do you think this will stop? And it has to at some point.
What will stop?
His tweets, his...
Oh, I don't think it's ever going to stop. Jane, I think, I think we're in for a long, wild, weird ride. I mean, the media wanted the Donald Trump reality show POTUS version, and the media got it. They gave it to us.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Michael in Winter Haven, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. How are you doing?
Good. We just have about a half a minute, though, Michael.
Okay. Just wanted to inform you and the listeners that suddenly on the National Geographic Channel and on the History Channel, then there's another channel, suddenly there is an abundance of Hitler's rise to power. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or not.
resulting from corporations getting into bed with the military. But the Reagan, Bush, and W. Bush administrations openly embraced these corporate powers, inviting them into the halls of governance and hungrily sucking at the teat of their campaign contributions. In the past, those promoting what is now called the New Conservative Agenda went by different names. The founders of America knew that for 6,000 years, civilized human beings had been ruled by one of three groups: kings, theocrats, or feudal lords. Kings held power by virtue of the threat of violence and continual warfare. Theocrats and popes held power by the people's fear of a god or gods, and feudal lords by wealth and the power that comes from throwing average people into poverty. The new idea of our founders in 1776 was to throw off all three of these historic tyrannies and replace them with a fourth way: the people being ruled by themselves, a government that derived its legitimacy and continuing existence solely from the approval of its citizens. Government of, by, and for we the people. They called it a constitutional Republican democracy. What we are seeing now in the conservative agenda is nothing less than an attempt to overthrow Republican democracy and replace it with a worldwide feudal state. The last time this happened, the feudalists took over a monarchy in North America. In December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I chartered the East India Company, ultimately leading to a corporate takeover of the Americas for the colonists that ended with the Boston Tea Party and 3 years later, the American Revolution. The corporate state partnership of the East India Company in the UK went on to conquer India, but eventually disintegrated as the British Empire faded and the British government, along with most of Western Europe, embraced somewhat more Jeffersonian forms of democracy. Conservatism raised its head again in the 20th century, revived by Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini. The Italian dictator even used the word corporatism to describe it and then later renamed it as fascism, a word defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as, quote, a system of government that exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership together with belligerent nationalism. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. Boy, John Brennan is seriously PO'd with Donald Trump, the director of the CIA. John Brennan, he just came down, Trump famously compared the CIA to Nazis back, last week, middle of last week, going off on their having, saying that it was the CIA who leaked the dodgy dossier on him, getting it on with hookers in Moscow hotels. And John Brennan says, tell the families of those 117 CIA officers who are forever memorialized on our wall of honor that their loved ones who gave their lives were akin to Nazis. Tell the CIA officers who are serving in harm's way right now and their families who are worried about them that they are akin to Nazi Germany. I found that to be very repugnant. And I will forever stand up for the integrity and patriotism of my officers who have done much over the years to sacrifice for their fellow citizens. He goes on to say there was an interest on the part of the Bureau to make sure that the president-elect was aware of and informed of the dossier. The feeling was wanting to make sure that given the very salacious nature of it, the president-elect was at least aware of it so he could take it into account and do what needs to be done. Period. So thin-skinned Trump, very, 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 very strange stuff. Anyhow, to your calls. Derek in Iowa City, Iowa. Hey, Derek, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
I was just having an argument with a friend of mine who was talking about one of the few rights that the federal government ensures is the defense of the country. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Is that we're allowed to have?
It's in the preamble of the Constitution.
So my argument to him was, because he didn't believe that healthcare, just as the government official, I'm not sure who it was that was on, said that healthcare is a right or a privilege, obviously, or not obviously, but I consider it a right. the same way because it's for life. The purpose of the military is to defend our lives. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the security of our nation. But implicit in that is our lives, and that was
how many viruses, cancers are more of a threat than somebody in the desert in Afghanistan.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So
I absolutely do.
At what point can we? Is it possible? Is it a bad idea? Can the healthcare system that we use be part of the military? I know that seems kind of silly, but if they're going to dissuade people from thinking that the threats are only from bullets, then obviously they're not. That's all I.
Well, this is how many European countries view this. I mean, the first national healthcare system, I believe, in the modern era, was started in the 1880s by the Kaiser in Germany, and it was a single-payer healthcare system. Everybody had health insurance, and it was done arguably to keep the people from revolting against the king, against the Kaiser. It was done as a way of mollifying the people, and that's you got that argument, but that argument has morphed in the minds of most Europeans and other countries around the world that have national healthcare systems, whether it's Mexico or Costa Rica or whatever, Canada, and that is that it is also part of the national defense. That if God forbid, some sort of contagious disease was brought to our shores, either by accident or by intent, if everybody in the United States doesn't have instant, immediate and easy access to health care, then, we could have an epidemic that could wipe out our country, that could cripple us, that could bring us to our knees. I mean, it could be another flu epidemic like 1919, or it could be a biological warfare attack. But it's crazy not to have a healthcare infrastructure that allows us to isolate or treat or cure or whatever everybody in the country in the event of one of those things happening. I consider that part of the national defense.
I agree with that. The other thing, the benefit from that is that you could also have a draft for people that wanted to go into healthcare. So you would get your medical care or your education taken care of as long as you gave 6 years to whatever, or you know what I'm saying. So you could go to school for free, and then you could have it as a
right. Back in the 80s when I lived in Germany, the way it worked was if you did a year of military service, you got free college education, as I recall. And I thought that was a pretty reasonable thing. But I frankly think we should have a draft. I think everybody when they graduate from high school should take a year off and give a year basically to their country, whether it's in the military or whether it's volunteering in a hospital or volunteering, in one of the programs like Vista, or the Peace Corps, something like that. There are a lot of great programs, and Jimmy Carter was almost moving us in this direction with a program that he had that we used when we ran the Community for Abused Kids. Where they would pay for the first year's salary of a person if they worked in a nonprofit, and this was a way of reducing the unemployment level, but it also helped out nonprofits all over the country. So there's a lot of ways to do this, Derek, and I think you're onto something. And I think the national security angle is probably the strongest way to sell single-payer health care, universal coverage, not universal access, universal, because everybody has access, arguably, to an emergency room, but universal coverage to conservatives is to say this is part of our national defense. Derek, I got to move along, but thanks a lot for the call. Cynthia in College Station, Texas. Hey, Cynthia, what's up?
Hi, Tom. This is kind of off subject, but I was wondering, Alec was on yesterday.
Yes,
anyway,
and thanks to him for that.
Yeah, he was great. But he was talking about on the reconciliation
Reconciliation, yes.
Is that a bill?
No, reconciliation is a process that legislation goes through when it involves money, or can go through when it involves money. So you cannot push a law through via reconciliation. For example, if you wanted to, outlaw smoking or something, You couldn't do that because it doesn't involve money. You couldn't do that, or if you wanted to, reduce or increase criminal penalties for anything. Make crack cocaine and the powder cocaine the same or whatever. You can't do that by reconciliation. But if you're appropriating money, you can do it via reconciliation, and you can attach things to that appropriation that have to do with how that money is either raised or spent. And so that's what and once something is designated as a reconciliation bill, that means that it can no longer be filibustered in the Senate, so it can be passed with a simple majority. So as long as the Republicans bring these things forward via reconciliation, they can't be filibustered. The other caveat on reconciliation is that it's only good for 10 years. Anything passed by reconciliation has to be renewed every decade. Make sense?
Yes. Well, anyway, I think that he had said something about Medicare, and Medicaid was also in there to be cut.
Yeah.
When Obamacare is cut.
Yes.
And he had wanted us to call our representatives. Well,
yes.
That's a really good idea. But also, I'm wondering, is there an organization that we could donate money to that just did ads on TV? Like, for example, that could be a short ad saying that was in that reconciliation thing about,
right.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it could be short but tough, and that way the Republicans would understand, and that's in there. And
well, I know that's the direction, Cynthia, that Alex is trying to take his organization. I don't know how often he mentioned, but he's the executive director of an organization called Social Security Works. And I'm pretty sure that their website is socialsecurityworks.org. And the works is a double entendre. It's like we're going to work on it, but it's a program that works. And so if you check out Social Security Works, that would be a great place to start. I don't know what other organizations outside of the Democratic Party itself, or at least the individual and more progressive members of the Democratic Party who are really fighting for health care as a right rather than a privilege. Cynthia, I have to move along, but thank you for the call. Great to hear from you. Brian in Bothell, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hello, Tom. I'd just like to say that I agree with Robert Kennedy Jr. saying that you are one of my heroes, and I thank you for everything. But what I wanted to say was when we go to work for a job, when we go to a place of work, we are selling the existence. We're selling the moments of our existence for a value, right? And what we're getting with the holding back of minimum wage and it's the beginning of the devaluation of your human existence. When somebody comes to you and says healthcare is too expensive, what they're really saying is that you don't have a monetary backing, because everything now in our country is based upon monetary value. You don't have the monetary backing to actually save your own existence. And so we have to realize that when they push forth these ideas, what they're doing is they're devaluing your human existence.
That's a really great way of saying it. It's like you don't have a right to see. My argument, with Steve in the 40 minutes ago, was that I was suggesting that basically he was saying that we don't have a right to life as articulated in the Declaration of Independence. Life, the rights to life, inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And either life or the pursuit of happiness both have to do with healthcare. Brian, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Talk Media News, and we'll be back with your calls as we continue through the program. Stick around. And welcome back. Barbara in Bothell, Washington. Hey, Barbara, what's on your mind? Barbara, watching Free Speech TV in Bothell, Washington? Maybe you're not in Bothell? Barbara?
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, listen. You know what the Democrats should do is exactly what Hank Paulson did for the Wall Street. He had a one-page piece of paper, and of course he was the cover boy for Business Week, Mr. Risk, right, before he got appointed Treasury Secretary. but he gave $4 trillion to Wall Street with one page.
Well, he
what
tried
the
to.
Democrats should do is say, abolish Obama-Romney care, Medicare for all. One sentence.
Mm-hmm.
One sentence.
Mm-hmm.
We have had a welfare system for bankers, the Federal Reserve, and the military, NSC, because we started a war. And I agree with Trump about the CIA. They are the cause of every fascist government in Latin America and the Middle East. I graduated from high school in '53 in Richland, Washington. I was a bomber. The same place where our new defense secretary is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have in this country, we get what we subsidize: war and poverty. By subsidizing Wall Street, the CIA, which causes all the war. We've abolished. Okay, I'm going to hang up because you guys have got a lot more to talk about. But
well, I think, Barbara, your point is something that's worth examining. And the new book out was new, I guess, about a year ago about the Dulles brothers, and the growth of the CIA provokes a lot of thoughtful discussion and head scratching and concern. And I think we all should have a certain healthy dose of skepticism, particularly after the CIA helped sell us the war in Vietnam and the war in Iraq, both based on lies. But that said, a country has to have an intelligence service. My big objection to the CIA isn't that they're the CIA. It's that so many of their functions have been privatized to private corporations that are unaccountable to we the people.
Have you ever read Secrecy and Democracy by Stansfield Turner?
I have not.
Well, then that's our problem. You're the most intelligent person on the airwaves, and nobody's interviewed him. I don't know if he's still alive. But
he's not.
Stansfield Turner was the only decent human being that ever was in charge of the CIA.
Interesting. He was, what years was he running the CIA?
Carter's administration. And
Carter
couldn't stand him because he was a nuclear submarine Navy person that was more intelligent than Carter. And, that's why we have people. If people in this country stopped giving money to tax-exempt organizations and took over their precinct. I'm 81 years old, and I'm still working at minimum wage. And I spend $500 a year doing my own precinct.
Wow. Good on you, Barbara. I have to run, but thank you so much for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thank you for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be back in just a moment with Talk Media News. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News, brought to you today by Glam Squad, an on-demand beauty service with a talented team of beauty professionals who deliver hair and makeup services anytime, anywhere. GlamSquad.com. Patrick Gavin on the line with us with Talk Media News. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Hey, how are you? I want to give you guys a quick update on what's been going on with President-elect Trump's Senate confirmations. If last week was the week that things went probably better than the incoming Trump administration had hoped, this is the week that things may go a bit worse. They've got a number of nominees that are facing at least a couple of struggles. One, we start with Betsy DeVos, the education nominee today. Nothing terribly too worrisome for her, but she is going to face a lot of questioning from Democratic and Republican senators about what her beliefs are on public schools. She's been a big private school advocate for much of her life, and she's still sort of holding back on many financial and ethical disclosures. That's one thing to keep in mind. But obviously, as you know, the big news story now coming out, I believe first reported by CNN, is that Representative Tom Price, who is Trump's cabinet pick for Health and Human Services, in fact, purchase shares in a medical device company just days before introducing legislation that would have directly benefited that company. There's been a lot of concern about that.
It's called insider trading, although Congress has exempted itself from those laws. So while what he did was technically not illegal, it certainly raises eyebrows.
Right, certainly wasn't in the spirit of the law. We're also hearing as well that some transition officials believe that Stephen Mnuchin's readiness for his confirmation, he is Trump's pick to run the Treasury, is not going as well. That he's not exactly the best when it comes to handling demonstrators. That he seemed, as one source said, uneven and stiff. So now extra Trump people are coming to help bring him, are coming in to help keep him ready. And then lastly, Labor Secretary Andrew Puzder. There's been some rumors here in Capitol Hill that he actually doesn't necessarily even want the gig to be Labor Secretary because he's come under a lot of criticism for not only Carl's Jr.'s commercials, but his opinions on minimum wages and also Obamacare. He tweeted out yesterday, I believe, that he is looking forward to the hearings, but some people think that he may just, end of the day, just pull out, not really thinking that all this.
I read a story that there were allegations of marital abuse in his past, and that might be a problem for him. Was that fake news or real?
That's interesting. That's the first I heard of it, which, of course, neither means it's not necessarily true or true. Yeah. My guess is that those types of things don't come up in the hearings. But at this point, I think Democrats really do want to derail one nominee. That's just sort of the way the politics of these things go. And if Andrew Puzder could be that person, if that's their best chance, I mean, that's someone that they have put a lot of their chips behind. Whether or not they would go the route of marital abuse, I don't know. I think if that story percolates to the top and the more mainstream news organizations begin reporting on it, then yeah, it is something that I think people will weigh, because obviously they're not only weighing their views, but they're also weighing their values. Is this somebody we believe serves the President of the United States best?
Right. And there are some serious issues about the future of the labor movement in the United States.
That's right, and I think that marital abuse would probably fall in the category of questionable activities, to say the least. So, that's the first I've heard of that story. But
yeah, so don't take it from me, Patrick, because it was a story I read on. I can't even quote the website that I read it on yesterday.
Isn't that frustrating now?
Yeah, I was.
All of a sudden, everything is up for grabs now.
Yeah, I was flying home from Los Angeles and just reading all these websites, on my phone, and I thought, whoa, what? Yeah, spousal abuse, I guess it was. That his wife was alleging his divorce or something. But like I said, I can't. I'm not. In fact, we probably shouldn't even be talking about that any more than what we've said, because it may well just be totally not even real.
Yeah.
Let's give the guy the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I mean, is there one nominee in particular that Trump's put up that you feel the most passionate? I mean, obviously, you and Mr. Trump have wildly different views, but I'd just be curious if there's
not
one
on everything
you could yank, who would it be?
I agree with Donald Trump that our trade policies suck and that we should blow up all our trade deals. I agree with Donald Trump that everybody in the United States should have not just access, but coverage in terms of health care. And I agree with Donald Trump when he said that the Republicans want to take away your Social Security, your Medicare and Medicaid, and he's not going to let them. So there are some areas where I actually agree with Trump. And I hope that he keeps those campaign promises. In terms of his nominees, Betsy DeVos, the DeVos family, and not just, their association with Eric Prince, who's like her, brother or something, or cousin, he's somehow related to the family, and the whole Blackwater thing. But I mean, she's never been to a public school. She's never served on a public school board. She's never had anything to do with public schools, as far as anybody can tell in the public record. It's always been private schools. And when Rick Snyder put a little dictator in charge of Detroit and Flint, the little dictator laws that the citizens of the state of Michigan overturned, and then the Republicans came back and overturned the overturn legislatively. One of the things that they did was, using a model that was promoted by think tanks associated with DeVos, privatized a lot of those schools, and to disastrous consequence. So I'm very concerned about the future of public education in the United States. I think public education is one of the things, the Horace Mann back in the 1880s, when he started pitching, free public education 1 through 8 in the United States as a way of building a great industrial democracy. I think he was right, and I think it did. And I see her as working against that aggressively. With regard to labor, Puzder, he's anti-union, he's anti-minimum wage, things like that. But I don't think that you're going to get anybody who's not sharing those views. Frankly, I would be surprised if we got anybody. It's not the person, it's the ideology, and I don't think the ideology is going to change, Patrick.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think with DeVos, I think that some comments sort of leaked today about what she will say later today, and she says that I will be a strong advocate for great public schools, but of course, read between the lines there. I think what she's talking about is whether or not these public schools meet her criteria of great, and if they don't, will she still be a strong advocate for them?
Right, and she's talking about voucherized public schools, basically.
Yeah, right. And one other comment she's expected to say is parents no longer believe that a one-size-fits-all model of learning meets the needs of every child, and they want different options, whether it's magnet, virtual, charter, home, religious.
Well, it's been a long time since we've had one size fits all. I mean, magnet schools didn't start with charter schools or private schools. They started within the public school system. And, back in and in fact, really, when I was going to school in the late 50s, Eisenhower was doing this, to counter the Soviets. There's a long history here of doing that kind of thing. Patrick Davin with Talk Media News. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from ADHD and the Edison Gene, a drug-free approach to managing the unique qualities of your child. A relatively new book by me. This is from the introduction. I was in India in 1993 to help manage a community for orphans and blind children on behalf of a German charity. During the monsoon season, the week of the big Hyderabad earthquake, I took an all-day train ride almost all the way across the subcontinent, from Bombay through Hyderabad to Rajahmundry, to visit an obscure town near the Bay of Bengal. In the train compartment with me were several Indian businessmen and a physician, and we had plenty of time to talk as the country flew by from sunrise to sunset. Curious about how they viewed our children diagnosed as having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, I asked, are you familiar with those types of people who seem to crave stimulation, yet have a hard time staying with any one focus for a period of time? They may hop from career to career and sometimes even from relationship to relationship, never seeming to settle into one job or into a life with one person, but the whole time they remain creative, incredibly creative and inventive. Ah, we know this type well, one of the men said, the other three nodding in agreement. Well, what do you call this personality type? I asked them. Very holy, he said. These are old souls near the end of their karmic cycle. Again, the other three nodded agreement, perhaps a bit more vigorously in response to my startled look. Old souls, I questioned, thinking that a very odd description for those who American psychiatrists have diagnosed as having a particular disorder. Oh, yes, the physician said. In our religion, we believe that the purpose of reincarnation is to eventually free oneself from worldly entanglement and desire. In each lifetime, we experience certain lessons, and finally we are free of this earth and can merge into the oneness of God. When a soul is very close to the end of those thousands of incarnations, he must take a few lifetimes to do many, many things to clean up all the little threads left over from his previous lifetimes. Another businessman added, this is a man very close to being enlightened. We have great respect for such individuals, although their lives may be difficult. Another businessman raised a finger and interjected, but it is through the difficulties of such lives that souls are purified. The others nodded agreement. I said, in America, they consider this behavior indicative of a psychiatric disorder. All three looked startled and then laughed. In America, you consider our most holy men, our yogis and swamis, to be crazy people as well, said the physician, with a touch of sadness in his voice. So it is with different cultures. We live in different worlds. We in the Western world have such holy and nearly enlightened people among us, and we say they must be mad. But as we're about to see, they may be interested, they may instead be our most creative individual, our most extraordinary thinkers, our most brilliant inventors and pioneers. To children among us, whom our teachers and psychiatrists say are disordered, they may in fact carry a set of abilities, a skill set that was necessary for the survival of humankind in the past. It has created much of what we presently treasure as our quality of life, and that will be critical to the survival of the human race in the future. There is immense power in how we choose to view what's happening around us. And this is terrifically important when we consider how we can best know our children and provide them with the upbringing they need, an upbringing that will lead them to be healthy, happy, functioning adults. The premise of this book is that children who have what we have come to know as ADHD are important and vital gifts to our society and culture, and in the largest sense can be an extraordinary gift to the world. In addition, for those adults who have been similarly diagnosed or defined, this book offers a new way of understanding themselves and their relationship to the world, a way that brings insight, empowerment, and success. The long history of the human race, as we'll see in this book, has conferred on us, some more than others, a set of predilections, temperaments, and abilities carried through the medium of our genetic makeup. These skills are ideally suited to life in the ever-changing world of our ancient ancestors, and we have now discovered are also ideally suited to the quickly changing modern world of cyberspace and widespread ecological and political crises that require rapid response. I will call this genetic gift the Edison gene, after Thomas Edison, who brought us electric lights and phonographs and movies and literally 10,000 other inventions. He is the model for the sort of impact a well-nurtured child carrying this gene can have on the world. While I'm principally referring to the DRD4 gene, see Chapter 5, the science of genetics is embryonic, with new discoveries being made every day. No doubt, sometime soon we'll have a better, more complete list of the specific genes that make up what Dave DeBronkart first called the Edison trait back in 1992, and Lucy Jo Palladino expanded on considerably in 1997 in her wonderful book, The Edison Trait. For the moment, though, I'll use the useful shorthand of the Edison gene. When Thomas Edison's school teacher threw him out of school in the 3rd grade for being fidgety, slow, and inattentive, his mother, Nancy Edison, the well-educated daughter of a Presbyterian minister, was deeply offended by the schoolmaster's characterization of her son. As a result, she pulled him out of school, and she became his teacher from then until the day he went off to work on his own for the railroads. And thus continues the story of people with ADHD and great success and how you can help your child be like that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. 370 cities across the world. This by Colin Taylor over at Occupy Democrats. And 370 cities across the world just announced Trump inauguration protests. 307. You know, when we were going to war, and let us not forget, by the way, with Iraq in 2003, let us not forget, by the way, that our media was beating the drums for that war. That Dick Cheney had created this stovepipe to funnel phony baloney information from people like Curveball and Ahmed Chalabi directly into the CIA, so that the CIA could then recycle that information back to the White House and thus to the press. And then Judy Miller was repeating this stuff in the New York Times. You had the New York Times arguing that we had to attack Saddam Hussein because he had weapons of mass destruction. You had MSNBC firing Phil Donahue because he was opposed to the war in Iraq. And MSNBC was, at that time, NBC was owned majority by General Electric, which was a major defense contractor. Now they're major owned by Comcast, which is an internet service provider. So now instead of promoting war, they won't talk about net neutrality. But in any case, let us not forget that there were over 1 million people worldwide protesting the United States' invasion of Iraq before it happened. And, I was among that group. I mean, I was speaking in churches and halls all across, literally from Seattle to New York City. And in New York with Mark Crispin Miller, and in Seattle with Paul, forgetting his last name. But in any case, we were all over the country. I mean, trying to stop this war that we were being sold. It was a sales pitch. Just like I would argue we were sold Donald Trump by the media. Les Moonves laid it out. CBS brought us, and it wasn't just CBS. It was CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, of course. Brought us Donald Trump. They were NBC. Donald Trump was NBC's top reality star. He was arguably the top reality star in the history of television. And so they're looking at the Donald Trump former reality TV shows and going, oh, this guy's good. He knows television, and he knows how to make money. He knows how to make money on television. So let's put him on TV. And then Les Moonves, speaking at a conference in San Francisco, at a tech conference, I believe it was a shareholder conference. I could be wrong, but Les Moonves, you have that clip, right, Shano? Yeah.
It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, and he went on to say, keep it up, Donald. I mean, it's not good for America. And yes, it was good for CBS. I wrote an op-ed about this that was published in Alternate last week and that got picked up by Salon, titled, I think, the Trump story the media dare not utter. And it was basically that, I mean, we can talk about, did the Russians hacking the DNC and revealing that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was putting her thumb on the scale against Bernie, did that cost Hillary the election? I'm sure it hurt. Was Comey and a cabal of Republicans at the FBI who were literally calling press conferences. I mean, emphasizing the fact that they were investigating Hillary Clinton at the same time that they were investigating Donald Trump, but not talking a word about it out loud. Did that have anything to do with it? And this top secret briefing that a number of members of Congress had a week or so ago, where I think it might have been John Lewis. It was one of the members of one of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, I'm pretty sure, who came out and said, words to the effect of, something's rotten at the FBI. It's been, there's this partisanship at the FBI. Did that cost Hillary Clinton the election, or did that cause Donald Trump to get elected? And then, of course, there's all the navel gazing about, should Hillary have gone to Michigan? Should she have campaigned in Wisconsin? What happened to that blue wall? Was it, a bad campaign? We've had these guys. But really, at the end of the day, the reason Donald Trump is president of the United States is because he was given $3 billion in free advertising on television by the television networks. Now, I realize people will say, yeah, but a lot of that was negative publicity. But see, this is what Donald Trump understood, and he has understood it his entire life. P.T. Barnum understood this. The Barnum and Bailey Circus is I think it's shutting down this year after a 170-year run or 130 years, whatever it is. But P.T. Barnum understood it. He said there's no such thing as bad publicity, just so long as they spell my name right. And Donald Trump got that. So that, quote, bad publicity that he kept getting on the press, it was, hey, it's Donald Trump. It was the Donald Trump show all the time. And the media, in my opinion, made the bet that 4 years of the Donald Trump show, reality, POTUS version, the Donald Trump reality show, President of the United States version, would be far more profitable than a competent but boring Hillary Clinton 4 years. Far more profitable. And here we are. And all around the world, people are looking at this going, this is not right. There's something wrong. 370 cities. The upcoming inauguration, this is Colin Taylor writing over at Occupy Democrats. The upcoming inauguration of Donald Trump is being met with mass trepidation from not just Americans, but by millions of people around the world. That much is evident in the fact that there will be 370 sister marches, in quotes, on 6 continents that are expected to draw over 700,000 people across the world protesting the inauguration of Donald Trump. 55 marches have been planned in cities from Paris to Nairobi to Sydney, reports the Huffington Post. 14,000 women are set to march in London alone. Not just Trump, but and they're protesting not just Trump, but a recent wave of far-right hate that is engulfing human societies across the globe, and in support of women's rights, LGBT rights, etc. This is a substantial story. Okay, so that's happening. Meanwhile, you've got Betsy DeVos going before Congress. I thought the hearings were today. I've not been keeping up on the TV monitors here in the studio, so I'm not sure if it's already happened or not. But Betsy DeVos, a multi-billionaire, married to the Amway family. She had her own money too, and I'm not a DeVos expert. I can't tell you where it all came from, but a lot of it came out of Amway, which back in the 70s was having all kinds of legal problems. People say, "Oh, it's a pyramid scheme." Well, they finally figured out or decided that it wasn't a pyramid scheme; it was just a fine thing. But it made a lot of money for the people on the top. And a lot of that money got recycled, apparently, at least according to Graham Langtree, writing at the International Business Times, ibtimes.co.uk. This is the headline. This is from last fall. This is from November 24th. So this did not come out as a result of Betsy DeVos being in the news because she's been nominated as the education secretary. This was just, hey, this is going on. The headline, child labor laws need loosening, says group funded by Trump's education secretary. Well, that's weird. How did that happen in November 24th, 2016? This must be a reprint of an earlier article. Somebody must have put that headline on it. In an early November, either that or the date's just wrong. In an early November blog post, that's when the post was, titled "Bring Back Child Labor." That's the actual quote, the title of the blog post. The Acton Institute's project coordinator, Joseph Sunday, muses about, quote, dismantling the range of excessive legal restrictions, minimum wage fixings, and regulations that lead our children to work less and work later. He quotes Jeffrey Tucker of the Free Market Foundation for Economic Education. Quote, if kids were allowed to work and compulsory school attendance was abolished, the jobs of choice would be at Chick-fil-A and Walmart. They would be fantastic jobs, too, instilling in young people a work ethic. Yes, that's what we need, child labor in the United States. Well, let's go back to the origin of public schools. I mean, the first public schools in the modern era were started by Queen Maria Theresa of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, basically what today we would call Austria, or maybe parts of Hungary, both. And they were called Spinnenschulen. And the deal that she made with families was, we will spend half a day educating your children if they will spend half a day spinning cloth. Thus, Spinnenschulen. Schulen is the German word for school. Spinnen is self-evident, right? And that, I mean, that was in the late 1700s. That was around the time of the American Revolution. And 100 years later, Horace Mann came forward and said, no, we need, free public education in the United States, at least 1 through 8. Was the original sales pitch, and the first group that bought it, in fact, was the people who controlled at the time the state of Massachusetts. It was a political party called the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner. They were referred to as the Know-Nothings because it was founded by a secret society whose slogan was, "I know nothing." They would meet each other with a secret handshake and say, "I know nothing," and that's how you knew that it was. And these guys who controlled Massachusetts, it was basically the Protestants who controlled Massachusetts, who were fighting against the Catholics, who were, growing in population in Massachusetts to the point that they were threatening the Protestants. And so finally, Horace Mann came to the Know Nothing Society and he said, "I've got a way for you to break the back of Catholic power." Because the Catholics were all self-educating their children. They were homeschooling their kids. And he said, you break the back of the Catholics by having public schools, and we'll indoctrinate them into Protestant ethic. And so, I mean, the beginning of public schools is bizarre, right? But the other sales pitch that he made to business that Horace Mann made was, if you have public schools, those young people will go into school, they'll sit there for 8 hours. Every hour the bell rings, they'll move from class to class. They'll learn how to respond to the bell. They'll learn how to do their job. They'll learn how to sit quietly and do one thing at a time. These are all necessary skills for factory workers. And so we will create a generation of good factory workers here in Massachusetts. And that's where it began. There's a whole chapter about this in a book I wrote called Thom Hartmann's Complete Guide to ADHD. But the DeVosses, Betsy DeVos was a board member from 1995 to 2005 of this organization that had this post by Jeffrey Tucker saying if kids were allowed to work and compulsory school education attendance was abolished, the jobs of choice would be Chick-fil-A and Walmart. They would be fantastic jobs instilling in young people a work ethic. It's almost the reverse argument of Horace Mann's argument. It goes on to say, since 2000, DeVos has given at least $1.28 million to the Acton Institute. Her mother, Elisa D. Prince Broekhuizen, the Prince as in Eric Prince as in Blackwater, is currently a director there. And DeVos's brother, Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater USA, whose mercenaries became infamous for the Nisour Square massacre during the Second Iraq War, gives talks at the institution. DeVos, who was the former chair of the Michigan Republican Party, says the status quo in education is unacceptable. Together, she said, we can work to make transformational change that ensures every student in America has the opportunity to fulfill his or her highest potential. And then the Acton Institute blog post about loosening child labor laws, Sun said that to get there, it would, quote, require diligent and drastic changes across our cultural spheres and institutions, including, quote, the powerful bureaucracies that seek control of our kids through top-down plans and programs. Right. No more public education.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Let's privatize it all. Chick-fil-A can run their own school, right? The kids can run the cash registers. It's called math class. Welcome back. Cheryl in Virginia Beach, Virginia, watching us on Free Speech TV on DirecTV. Hey, Cheryl, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Cheryl.
Yeah, if I'm a little shaky, I lost my mother on the night.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
About Trump, whether he should be impeached or not. I think yes, but then what alternative are we left with? That would be Pence. And I think he would probably be worse, if not just as bad.
Domestically, anyway, I believe Pence is worse than Trump. Internationally, I don't know.
You know, and Trump has, as far as I'm concerned, he has violated the Logan Act, if not treasonous.
He being who? Trump or Pence?
I'm sorry?
You said he. Are you referring to Trump or Pence?
Trump.
Trump, okay. How did he violate the Logan Act?
By inviting Russia to come in and hack.
Oh, yeah, he did it in the debate, didn't he? He looked right into the camera and he said, Russia, if you're listening, go, see if you can find Hillary Clinton's missing emails.
Exactly. And as far as I know, I don't think anybody's ever been prosecuted under that act.
I don't know.
Maybe one, if anything. As far as I know, I don't think anybody's ever been prosecuted. Also, he is alienating our allies, which is super dangerous. He's racially biased. I think the man is mentally ill myself. He's thin-skinned. He's a narcissist. He is, I think he's racist. I'm sorry. And there's just so many things about him that I personally, I believe that the man should be psychologically evaluated. I don't think he's anywhere near responsible enough to run this country, and it scares. I don't know if I can use that.
No, don't use the word if you're gonna use a word you have any doubts about. Don't use it, Cheryl.
It scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I've got two grandchildren, 18 and 15.
Yeah.
And by the way, my 15-year-old has ADHD, and he's picked the drums up just like that and plays his little butt off.
Oh, yeah.
And he's off all medications.
Cool.
But as far as Trump goes, if he's impeached, then we get Pence. And if something happens and he's impeached, then we get who?
Paul Ryan.
Ryan, exactly. So,
it's like pick your poison.
I'll be doing everything I can, along with everybody I know and organizations I belong with, to try to do something about this. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I truly believe if something isn't done and done soon, and also the hearings they've been holding.
Cheryl, we're out of time. I'm sorry. Thank
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Chris in Darlington, South Carolina. Just a minute to the break. Chris, a quick one?
Quickly, well, I don't think Donald Trump will be, as much as he deserves it, I don't think he will be impeached until he does something vile or boneheaded enough that the Republicans agree that he needs to go.
But see, if Donald Trump were to pitch, for example, I mean, he came out and he said everybody should have health care. If he were to come out and pitch Medicare for all, which he has actually supported in the past, not since he kind of became a Republican, but 10, 15 years ago, he was, on numerous occasions speaking favorably about single-payer health care, Medicare for all. If he were to come out and do that, you don't think the Republicans would impeach him?
They may. It depends on if he forces it enough to go.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. It's going to be interesting, Chris. It's going to be interesting. Watch this space. Chris, I'm sorry we're out of time, but thanks for listening to us on SiriusXM, and I look forward to your next call. It is 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The Washington Post says the Trump inauguration is going to be a low-key affair. That's code for nobody wants to show up. The cross currents and dynamics at work in this evolving Trump administration are absolutely fascinating. He has virtually none of the institutional Republicans on board with the populist message that got him elected to the White House. Right? If Donald Trump had said, okay, here's my message, guys. I'm going to be a classic Republican running for president, and I want to privatize Medicare. I want to turn Social Security over to Wall Street. I want to roll back the protections for gay people. I want to undo Roe v. Wade. I want to strengthen the drug law and build more private prisons. I want to privatize all aspects of healthcare in the United States. The list just goes on and on. If he had said, we're gonna certify Citizens United, and we're gonna put it into legislation, in addition to the Supreme Court. We're going to continue the war on drugs. We're going to continue our building our military he did say that. We're going to have more money for defense contractors. We're going to push for the TPP and other trade deals. If he had said those things, he never would have gotten elected. If Donald Trump had gone through the Republican agenda, he never would have gotten elected. But he didn't. He defied the Republican Party in their own primary. He got elected to the Republican, as the Republican candidate for president of the United States by saying George W. Bush was the worst president in history. I will not touch your Social Security or Medicare. We're going to bail out the people instead of the banksters. Some of these banksters need to be going to jail. The TPP is dead on arrival, and in fact, I'm going to tear down NAFTA and all that other stuff. That's the stuff he got elected on. Now, he threw in a few sops to the racists, the homophobes, actually, it wasn't so much an anti-gay agenda other than having Mike Pence on his platform, on his ticket. Mike Pence is arguably the most virulently anti-gay politician in the United States of any consequence. Certainly one of the most anti-woman politicians in the United States of any consequence. But Trump didn't run on that. Trump ran on this populist stuff. And you will not find a Republican who will agree with him on these things. There used to be populist and progressive Republicans. Not just, Howard Taft and William Howard Taft and Teddy Roosevelt. But, there used to be progressive Republicans, in the 60s and 70s. The real purge of the Republican Party, getting rid of the progressives in the Republican Party, happened in the 1980s, or began in the 1980s during the Reagan administration, and then really picked up steam during the George W. Bush administration. And so there's nobody left in the Republican Party who agrees with Donald Trump on the main things that people who voted for him for president were hoping he would do. So what's going to happen? Is he going to do it like Reagan and make it all smoke and mirrors? That's been my prediction all along. That he will spend a bunch of money on infrastructure, which will create a bunch of jobs and it'll stimulate the economy. And he'll do a giant tax cut for billionaires, but there'll be enough in that tax cut to give a couple $100 to the average person, which will stimulate the economy. And he'll say, see, the tax cuts worked. Trickle down actually does work. Ronald Reagan was right. When in fact, it wasn't the tax cuts, it was the infrastructure spending that did it. And, he and all the Republicans will lie about it, as they've been doing for 40 years. And, it'll give them the power to do more and more of that. Or is Donald Trump going to actually stand up and say, I have no loyalty to these guys? The institutional Republican Party. In fact, I would say when he made Steve Bannon his chief strategist, it was a giant middle finger to the Republican Party. Steve Bannon is the guy who said that they should be, his phrase, bitch slapped, as I recall. Or I should say B-word slapped. It's my apologies. But you get my point. Is he going to take on the Republican Party? I don't think he will, unless we all help him a little. Not sure yet how to do that, but the strategies are evolving. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
There is a real opportunity here, I believe. We'll see. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a couple of news things here I wanted to share with you, and then we'll go back to your phone calls. The first is Nadia Prupis, I think is probably how it's pronounced, Prupis, a staff writer for Common Dreams, wrote yesterday over at commondreams.org. The headline, shocking. North Dakota Republicans want to legalize running over protesters. Bill introduced last week would protect any driver who, quote, unintentionally causes injury or death to an individual obstructing vehicular traffic. It's House Bill number 1203 in the North Dakota legislature. The article says, running over protesters may soon be legal in North Dakota if conservative lawmakers are successful. Representative Keith Kempenich R. Bowman, one of the bill's co-sponsors, told the Bismarck Tribune on Wednesday the roads are not there for protesters. They're intentionally putting themselves in danger. This is what the law says. Quote, I'm reading from the law itself, or the proposed law. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, a driver of a motor vehicle who unintentionally causes injury or death to an individual obstructing vehicular traffic on a public road, street, or highway is not guilty of an offense. This is like stand your ground, only with a car instead of a gun. And you don't even have to say, I felt scared. All you have to say is, I didn't intend to kill him. He was on the road. I was driving. It was an accident. Tara Hauska, who's been a guest on this program a number of times, shall we say, she's an indigenous water protector and attorney who has resided at the Dakota Access Pipeline Resistance Camp since August, told NBC News that the bill was, quote, a direct violation of our First Amendment rights. And she's right. She went on to say it's shocking to see legislation that allows for people to literally be killed for exercising their right to protest in a public space. She is absolutely right. And meanwhile, in Davos, the world elite is there. It costs about $600,000 to come to Davos. I mean, you know, the tickets are free, but first you have to contribute $587,000 or something like that to the World Economic Forum in order to get that free ticket. It's a you know, so it's basically, you know, the rich, powerful, famous of the world getting together, all these private jets and everything. And there's this fellow by the name of Anthony Scaramucci, I'm guessing is how it's pronounced, Scaramucci. He was the former owner of Skybridge, which is a hedge fund. He is now the public liaison official for Donald Trump. And he is the only representative of the Trump administration who is at Davos right now. And this was published 4 hours ago in the Financial Times. Just happened. And the article is by Gillian Tett in Davos. A senior member of Donald Trump's team insisted that the president-elect was committed to globalization, open trade, and NATO, despite recent comments that unsettled America's allies. And they quote Mr. Scaramucci, and he goes on to say, and this is a particularly interesting quote, separately, Mr. Scaramucci argued, this isn't a quote, this is the article, this is from the Financial Times article. Separately, Mr. Scaramucci argued that European leaders need to heed the lessons from Mr. Trump's surprise victory, since it signaled growing popular distrust and anger with the elite. And he insisted that elite observers should not take Mr. Trump's communication via Twitter too literally. They should not pay too much attention to his colorful speech and metaphors, since the president-elect was simply choosing to communicate with ordinary people in the most effective medium. Let me translate that for you. Trump is saying what he's saying the way he's saying it because the rubes, the suckers, will buy it. But he doesn't mean it. The Financial Times article goes on to say Mr. Scaramucci's comments were relatively well received by many of the Davos delegates, not least because other Republican figures have also been trying to present a reassuring message to Europe and Asia in recent days. Bizarre. Bizarre. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind?
Just one of you heard of the WEF, World Economic Forum. It's meeting in Davos, Switzerland this week. And it's got, our 8, most richest people in the world, Bezos and all the other ones. If you've heard of that, I read it in Common Dreams today.
Yeah. Well, I was just talking about the Davos meeting. And yes, there are now eight white men who own wealth equal to half the world. And that is wrong. I mean, it's just fundamentally wrong. And
do you believe that the unions could stop this? Could put a dent in this, discrepancy in wealth inequality? Would be a great way to start with.
The unions would having a strong labor union movement in the United States would certainly lift labor. I mean, one of the things we know is that in right-to-work for less states, the Republican-controlled states with right-to-work laws, that the average worker makes $6,000 a year less than workers in states that still allow unionization, in its full form. But I don't think that that's even close to the size of the problem we need. What we need is functionally, and this, by the way, Jeremy Corbyn suggested this last week in the UK. He's the leader of the labor movement in the United Kingdom. Is a maximum wage law. You can't earn over a certain amount. And frankly, we had that in the United States. We had it from World War I until 1921, and it was called a 91% top tax rate. And then we had it from 1934, I think it was, until the Reagan administration. Again, a top tax rate of 91%. It was taken down to 74% by LBJ in '64, but still 74% is functionally a maximum wage law. And this is one of the things that actually there's been a number of economists. Thomas Piketty is probably the most famous who pointed this out, that When the top tax rate is above 50%, inequality is diminished. And when the top tax rate is below 50% on money earned after a couple $1 million a year, then inequality is enhanced or is made worse. And so I think that, we need to be looking at wealth taxes, and we need to be looking at, raising the top income tax. It's just very straightforward stuff. Jeff, thanks for the call. Katie in Hamul, California. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm glad I was watching and not just listening when you had that Steve, is it Beamer on with his?
Yeah, Beeman.
Pardon?
Beeman, B-E-A-M-A-N.
Okay, just because the look on his face was so smug and so smarmy, and I thought this guy could be picking his teeth with human bones. It's like he's never been outside the U.S. I'm married to an Australian and have been for 37 years, and my kids are dual citizens, and they live in Australia. I'm a landed immigrant getting my citizenship. My husband's back there after retiring from California, and their system is fantastic. Just a really quick anecdote about it. And our taxes are not higher there in Australia. Certainly I'm not any expert, but I've lived it. I spent 6 months of the year in Australia living there. And we were on a small trip of 4 people. And the other couple, the gentleman was dying of brain cancer. He had been a bricklayer. His wife was a nurse. And they had built their life, and they had 2 kids in their late teens. They had worked their whole lives, and they still were, and their kids were going to free, what would be community college, in our case, to get professions. Mm-hmm. And they own their own home. They built it themselves. He was getting terrific. Because she was a nurse, she was able to describe in great detail the free health care that he was getting because they were middle class. They didn't make a lot of money, but they had their own home. And this guy, this actually makes me tear up. It was a few years ago, and I'm sure he's no longer with us. And he, like she said, when he wasn't there, he is going to die knowing that our family is not going to be ruined because of his disease.
Right, and, because he's Australian.
Just a seemingly strong, healthy, outdoor guy, and just a brain tumor.
Yeah, because he's Australian.
And how can people not understand that? Yeah. It absolutely drives me crazy. I'm on their medical system, of course, in Australia, and I get fantastic care.
Yeah.
And again, our taxes are not higher. We pay into it because we can afford it. Our kids who are in their 30s don't, but they will.
Right.
And
well, it's because they don't have insurance companies as middlemen who are skimming 20-30% off the top. So, they can do it at a reasonable cost, as the rest of the world does. We're the village idiots. We're the suckers of the world because of these right-wing think tanks funded by these petro-billionaires who keep telling us, oh, no, we can't have national health care. Katie, thank you for the call, and thank you for the very poignant story.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after this sticker. And welcome back. Sandy in Norwood, North Carolina. Hey, Sandy, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech on Dish.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Since we are stuck with Trump and we're apparently going to get his idol Putin as part of the package, why don't we turn this into an advantage and push him for Russia's food safety standards? Putin will not allow GMOs in his country, no Roundup. He won't even accept Ukrainian salt because it doesn't meet his standards. Apparently, he's got very safe food over there. How about we push him to adopt the same standards that they have?
That's an interesting idea. And by the way, in that, Russia is simply, mimicking the rest of Western Europe.
Yes.
Same thing. But yeah, it's a great idea. If you love Russia so much, why don't you bring some of their food safety standards to the United States? Exactly. That's a good one, Sandy.
Does everything right. Go ahead, copy him on that one.
There you go. That's a great one, Sandy. Thank you for that. Ray, watching Free Speech TV in West Islip. Is it Islip or Islip, New York? I never knew.
Islip.
Islip. Thank you, Ray.
Hey, Tom.
What's on your mind?
Thanks for fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give you two pieces of info and then make a quick point about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned about Tom Price before with insider trading.
Yeah.
And it actually is illegal now. The 2012 Stock Act, which Joe Lieberman introduced, was passed. They can no longer make money on insider trading.
I thought there were enough loopholes in that it was essentially Swiss cheese.
You got a point there, but it is illegal now. I mean,
Okay.
how they get around it, obviously, like everything else, they get around.
Right.
But it is illegal. Actually, a few members of the Democratic Party have asked that it be brought up with the ethics, which is funny how they wanted to get rid of the ethics. It's a little.
Yeah.
The point is on Thursday. It was time that.
Ray, your phone is fading in and out, and I'm getting about every other word. I don't know if you can step closer to a window or something.
Yeah, you have me now?
Yeah. Now you sound good.
Okay. Puzder, the ex-wife, during her divorce, it was in Time magazine. She actually did claim that there was abuse going on.
Spousal abuse, yeah.
And he kicked her, he punched her. When she went to call the police, he pulled the phone out of the wall.
Wow.
So that's and then of course recently she just retracted it, or she pulled back on it. Very convenient.
Right.
And then as far as Trump goes, all this little back and forth about his tweets, and we're going to get nowhere. The only way to stop him is to have a consistent message, which the Democrats don't do. Republicans always come out with a consistent message. Every time you hear them on one of the shows, it's the same message. Democrats come out, it's nuanced. People don't pay attention to nuanced stuff. They just bullet headlines. And if we pound away at his support with the Trump people, just like we got rid of Nixon, when his party bailed on him because he had no more support, they were like gone.
Yeah.
When the Republicans see that his support is waning.
Well, I'm seeing this happening, Ray, and it's that they're hanging like a tire around his neck, a flaming tire around his neck. They're hanging Russia around Trump's neck, the same way that Trump tried to do that with the birth certificate to Obama. And whether it's a strategy that's going to work or not, I'm skeptical. But it seems to be that's what they've decided on. Ray, I got to run. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you, and John in Seaside, California. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, when you had your guest on, Steve Beeman, he had made a comment where he basically said a rising tide lifts all boats, and you said not all boats. And then
No, I said what about the people without boats?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. And his response to that was that poverty around the world was much worse than it is in the United States. And he was talking about absolute poverty when really the issue was relative poverty, where, you have poverty within a society that keeps people from getting access to things that help them move up the economic ladder, like education and internet access and cell phones.
Yeah.
So he was conflating two different ideas there. And I kind of went nuts because he had basically led us to believe that he was an economic expert.
Yeah.
And I had just, I don't know.
It was an interesting conversation because he just came right out and said healthcare should be a privilege, not a right. And if you get cancer, if you got an infectious disease, okay, fine. Maybe the government should intervene in order to protect the rest of us. But if you get cancer and you can't afford to pay for the treatment, good luck, Charlie, you're dead. And, that at least, we should give him credit for being honest. That has been the Republican position all along. It still is.
Sure. And then the question is to a guy like him, a finance guy, is what are the negative externalities for everybody else in society who's, we're now living in a society that have a lot more sick people walking around, whether it's, incurable tuberculosis or, other infectious diseases.
Right, and the principal externality is a loss of productivity. We know that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it takes an economic hit. Excellent points, John. You caught some good nuance there. Thanks a lot for the call and for sharing that with us. Jim in Lombard, Illinois. Hey, Jim, what's up? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Hi, Tom. I just had one thing to say about Republican ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Republican ideology is that if you can't make enough money selling your labor, then you are expendable. And to me, that is sadism.
Yeah, well, it's a variation on a system that dominated Europe for well over 1,000 years. Serfdom, basically. It's kingdom. It is an economic / political system that's very, very old, which doesn't value anybody except basically the top 5 or 10%. And the Republicans have embraced the top 1% aggressively. And it's just not a good thing. Jim, thanks a lot for the call. Lori in Bellevue, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I think that President Obama should just declassify the dossier information in the name of national security. I think that the threatening overtones throughout Trump's whole campaign, and today he accused the CIA director, John Brennan, of leaking information regarding the dossier.
Well, that accusation was last week. Brennan's pushback was today.
Oh, his pushback was today, right. And his pushback, I think, was, hey, we have agents, men and women out in the field in harm's way. Yep. And you're accusing us of being Nazi Germany-like. And this is just not just unsettling. I think that it's a national security issue. I think after the briefing, you were wondering who it was. Maxine Waters came out of that briefing.
That's right.
Given to all of the Congress people. And the look on her face was just, it represented the look on everybody's face. And she said, I don't trust the FBI. And I think that information should be released immediately by President Obama. And let us decide if we want Trump and, Pence to even get near the White House. Let's give it to the American people. Trust us. He is attacking.
I think it's too late for that, Lori, although I agree that if there is a Republican cabal inside the FBI that was committed to getting a Republican Senate and a Republican president, even if it was Donald Trump, then that's a cancer that needs to be cut out. If it's not the case, then that needs to be said too. The FBI's reputation is on the line here, and the FBI, plays a very, very important role in the life of this country. I mean, it's our principal federal law enforcement agency, and that cloud needs to be cleaned up. I'm with you, Lori. Thank you for the call. Brandon in Chino Hills, California. Hey, Brandon, what's up?
All right, how you doing?
Good.
The rise of Trump is pretty simple. As you've mentioned before, starting in 1968 with the Nixon election, the majority of white Americans have not voted for a Democratic presidential candidate or Democratic president. That's just the facts. At the end of that time period was the end of the civil rights era. So
Are you sure that's a fact? I've never heard that.
That's actually from Pew Research.
Since 64?
Yeah, starting in 68, Pew Research. If you look up Pew Research,
I know who Pew is.
Yeah, no Democratic presidential candidate or president has gotten the majority. Not Obama, not Carter, not even Clinton.
Huh.
The reason progressivism will never come to this country like in Scandinavian countries are because of the racial history we have. Even though the majority of white Americans for the last 40 years are the base of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
That is the fact.
Yeah. No, well,
they're the only group.
That I don't disagree with.
They're the only group. And even though personally they support social programs, even members of the alt-right have said they support socialism and social programs, they do not want their tax dollars, not all, but the majority, based on how they vote, they do not want their tax dollars going towards social programs for people of color.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree with you, Brandon. I think
it's nuance. We can say it's people losing their jobs. White Americans are the base of the Republican Party. They are the only group that has for the last 40 years solely supported Republican candidates.
Yeah. That should cause all white people to do some serious soul searching, because I certainly, well, I just don't know what to do with that statistic other than be horrified.
If you look up Pew Research,
no, I'm believing you, Brandon. It's
it's sad. It's sad, and I don't believe all white people should do soul searching. I believe white progressives shouldn't do any soul searching. The problem is the majority of white Americans vote conservative because they do not want, back in the robber baron age, and even they supported during FDR, they supported progressive ideas.
Yeah.
It all changed once those ideas opened up to minorities
in the 60s,
during the civil rights era.
Yeah, with LBJ. Yeah, Brandon, thank you for the call. And on that note, we've got a lot of work to do. I mean, all of us, we all have a lot of work to do. Well, let's get started. We're preparing for the inauguration of this guy here in D.C., and it is no time to go to sleep. It is no time to check out. It is no time to say no more to politics. We have to throw ourselves into this. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.